Yeah.
Perfect.
So actually, after you call it the order, I'll just introduce her.
Okay. So welcome, everyone. This is the WMGLD Board of Commissioners meeting on November 2nd, 2022. It is 6:30 p.m. right now, and I'll be calling the meeting to order. And just to let everybody know that this meeting is being recorded.
I just want to, I don't know if you may or may not have known, but this is Sylvia's last week with us. She's retiring and she has agreed to continue to do the minutes for us. She'll be patching in like she is now. So she'll continue to be our minute secretary, but she's leaving us on Friday. So we've hired her replacement. It's Tara Aniello. Tara's background, she comes from, joined us from Merrimack Electric. So she has a lot of experience as an office manager, and we've been lucky enough to have her overlap for a couple of weeks with Sylvia too. So we think she's ready to jump in. I don't know if Mark, you have anything else?
Yeah, I don't really have anything else. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, but yeah, she's taking, right up with Sylvia and hopefully, taking right off where Sylvia left off. So it's good. It's a good transition.
So welcome aboard, Tara. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Sylvia, congrats on retirement. Happy that you're leaving in retirement, but sad that you're leaving us as well. So, but congrats. And Tara, welcome.
Thank you.
So you'll be with us through the end of this calendar year? You mentioned Sylvia staying on, or just for the next meeting?
No, so she's going to stay on as our minute secretary
For how?
for meetings.
Oh, meetings. Okay.
Yeah.
But through like December or?
No,
Okay.
until she doesn't want to deal with us anymore. So she'll just be paid hourly for the work she does for the minutes.
Got it. Okay. That's helpful.
And she doesn't know it yet, but she'll still be available for questions.
I figured that much.
So yeah, her role will continue as minute secretary. So she does a really good job with them, and we can't let her get bored in retirement. So we're gonna.
Well, congratulations on retirement, but no congratulations on continuing to write the minutes. That is a
Thank you.
daunting task. But thank you so much.
Yeah, congrats, Sylvia and Tara. Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving into the agenda, chair's remarks. I don't have any remarks today. Passing along to the commissioners, any other remarks or reports?
Last month, I had the honor to attend the dedication and ribbon cutting of the MIC, now called the Master Sergeant Alexander Cotton Memorial Solar Project out in Ludlow, Mass. We know as Project 2020A. I attended that with Commissioner Clay and Pete, and it was just for me personally great to see the project build something that as a member of the board approved, and seeing it start to finish, and being built in a pandemic and basically coming in almost on time, and now being the largest municipally owned solar project in Mass. I'd also personally like to thank and honor the late Master Sergeant Cotton for his 35 years of honorable service to the U.S. Air Force. I met his family during the dedication, as we all did. And his wife shared that Master Cotton was actually working on a project to bring solar to the Westover Air Force Base that was discovered after the project had been dedicated in his name. So it was just kind of cool to see that his legacy continues on through that project. Something that we'll discuss later during in the agenda around trees. Kind of was brought up, my neighbors on Richardson Street had brought to my attention the lack of notification and communication to abutters that a tree was going to be removed. They were kind of shocked and upset when they came home and the tree was gone from that. And I'll just speak further around that in our agenda.
Thank you. Anything else?
Nope.
Anything from you, Phil?
No, I have nothing. Thank you.
Okay. Next is town council liaison comments. I do not see our liaison with us tonight. And beyond that is public comments. And I do not believe we have any members of the public on right now. On to the minutes. Does anyone have additional comment on the minutes and updates? I'm not hearing any.
I'll make the motion to approve the October 2022 minutes as in the board book. I'll second that.
How do we want to do this with Phil on the phone? Do we want to go through one by one or just
We
say,
can do one by one.
Commissioner Corsi, aye.
okay,
Aye. Aye.
and I.
Sounds
And just to note that Commissioner Warshall is not here, so he'll be, actually, good question. How do we get his approval of minutes?
You don't need it.
Do we have a majority?
Okay, so we just say that he was
Yeah,
absent.
any vote that's taken, as long as there's a quorum.
Okay, so we note that he didn't vote.
Correct.
Great.
It'll be noted because he won't be in attendance.
Okay.
Congratulations, Sylvia. We got a home run on the last.
Yeah, Matt, I just joined by phone.
Thanks, Matt. We'll get to you in a bit.
No problem. Just having a little bit trouble getting the video set up, but I'm here.
All right.
Okay. Thanks for joining, and I also see a member of the public, Stephen Ingalls on. Hello, welcome. We just got through public comment, but before we get too far in this, do you want to make any public comment at this time, Stephen?
Yeah, well, I was hoping just to join for a quick second, if I couldn't. And the comment that sort of I just had to make was, so I'm Stephen Ingalls. I live at 40 Richardson Street. And recently, within the last 2 weeks, we had 2 trees get taken down on the utility side of the street. Just, you know, right near our house. And while we sort of recognize that that's a necessity for both safety and, you know, the utility's sake, the trees were getting big. They were sort of, my understanding is that they were sort of nearing the end of their life. You know, if the utility didn't take them down, then they were going to come down of their own, and that's not good for anybody. It was still sort of, it came as a shock. You know, we've had that tree in front of our house since we moved in here 16 years ago, and then just came home to a crew just sort of topping it off, and now those two trees on our street are now just, they've lost their foliage. They're just basically stumps about, you know, 12 feet tall, sitting there waiting for whatever next step in the process is supposed to happen. And my understanding is that you know, I think we're on a list to get some trees on our street because we're in a sort of a, forget the word for it, but it's like a canopy desert. There's not a lot of tree cover on Richardson. And I think the idea was to do some plantings after those trees came down. And so we're waiting for that to happen. But anyway, back to the sort of where you folks are. If the utility was electing to sort of take some trees down, I know that they're town-owned trees, but it's still sort of a surprise to people in the neighborhood. So if there's anything from the notification side that could happen, whether it's a flyer in a mailbox, a post on a tree, even like a ribbon around the tree that would even cause us to sort of reach out to folks and say, what's going on? It seemed like communication in this space was severely lacking. So I know it's the town's trees, not our trees. But again, I think sort of being good stewards of the community, we could use a little bit of added notification. And I don't think that bar is too high.
Yeah, we agree. I know there were a lot of communications that night. We apologize for that. I explained to Tom that one of the issues we had was that Mayor, who's usually very reliable, just came back to town and they get a list of hazard trees that need to come down in the fall, and they didn't warn us that they were coming back, which they typically do. So that was the first ball that was dropped, but Dave's worked on a couple other things too. You want to just explain the process going?
Yes.
Another thing about Richardson specifically is that we had been working with the town on that entire street because there's going to be more than just we're taking down 2 or 3 more of the old trees, and the entire street will be replanted. However, the issue is that he's got some water work that he wants to do first. So
Some street and sidewalk.
street and sidewalk work that's going to be done there as well. So I think, yeah, overall, both sides dropped the ball on communicating with you folks on that. We apologize for that. And so I think both Dennis from the town side and our side are working on.
So we always work with the tree warden to remove trees on the public way. So the tree warden goes out and surveys the trees and then gives us permission to remove the trees. And then we want to make sure that the folks that live in where the tree is in front of the house are notified. So we don't notify everyone, but we are going to make sure that we are going to at least the house where the tree is located, right in front of the house. So Ms. Dingles, we will in the future be notifying people, residents like yourself, where the tree is located in front of your house. And also we'll put a mark on it, an X prior to removal. We don't do it originally when it's identified, because then it gets confusing, because the town doesn't approve all the trees that we request. So it gets to be confusing when you have a mark on a tree or ribbon on it, and then everyone asks a lot of questions, what's going on with that tree, when it's really in the process of just being evaluated still. So after it's evaluated, then we will, and we have permission, then we'll put an X on it so that people know, and if they call up, we can ask, does it have an X? We'll say, yes, we'll talk to them, but also we will talk to the residents where the tree is located in front of their house. So this year we have this fall roughly 25 to 28 trees to remove. All the with the exception of what happened on Richardson, all the abutters or all the residents have been notified whose the tree is in front of the house.
Yeah, again, we apologize. It's
Yeah.
usually a better practice than that. Part of it is we got a little flat-footed because Mary usually warns us. What happened, I think, was, and they're a pretty reliable contractor, but they had a couple of big jobs canceled, so they just decided to come work on the fall list. And they didn't actually tell us that they were coming into town.
They
So
jumped the gun a little bit.
Yeah.
And I mean, they had permission from the tree warden to remove the trees. So but they jumped the gun and they didn't. Normally they notify us and then they send us an email, the tree warden and us, to let us know that they're planning on coming into town, and they'll be working so that if a resident calls, which they do occasionally, then we'll be able to talk to them. The other thing I wanted to point out are two things, actually. So the trunks of trees that are on your property, they have one crew that comes around and they remove the canopy of the tree. And then they have another tree called a log truck that comes in and removes the stump. So that portion of the tree will be removed within the next week or two. And then we will be planting a tree in the grass strip where those two trees have been removed. Unfortunately, we won't be replanting trees along the entire Richardson Street area because
right away.
yeah, right away, because the town has asked us not to do that just yet because of some pending work. So once the work is complete with the sidewalk, the curbing in the street, then it's our plan to come back and replant trees under the utility lines that are utility friendly trees that won't be in conflict with the wires.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate sort of you folks taking the time to look at it and look at the process. Hopefully that sort of saves some people some surprises in the future. So yeah, no, thank you for all that work. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask one question, though? What is the timing, I guess, between marking the tree and then having it come down? How much time will there be, I guess?
Varies, I'd say about a month.
About a month.
It'll vary though.
Vary.
But again, on the town-owned trees, it's their call. So as long as he's approved it,
Then we'll mark it.
yeah,
We'll mark it once they approve it for removal.
Yeah.
And then they group their work and then they come into town, and some require a crane, some require just a tree crew. So it varies, but I would say a month is usually a safe bet.
Okay, and the fact that this is a really kind of the canopy is really lacking. In conversations with the town, is there a more comprehensive effort going on? I think you mentioned that WMGLD has some replanting to do in that area, but is
on this street, they've been working.
This whole area. So now
Okay.
what we do in the entire town is that we have a process that we implemented because of another street where we did some tree plantings. the town came in and kind of.
Did road work after.
And they did more work than really anyone anticipated. So we implemented with the DPW a new process, probably like 3 or 4 months ago. Before we do any tree planting, we send the town a list, the town engineer a list. And he'll review the list. And if he has any road work planned, or curb work, or sidewalk planned, he'll tell us not to do that street right now. And he'll give us, and we'll give them, like we probably gave them 40 streets this year. And we're more than half of them are rejected because of planned work. So we get their approval now, not approval, but we coordinate with them to make sure we're not planting trees in an area they'll be doing new sidewalk, streets and curbs within the next few years.
Do we have did they give us a time frame on any of those streets? You know, how far out are we delayed, you know,
No,
take a tree and, you know, if the town's not rejected the street and they're not planning to do anything for 5 years, that's, you know, that's a long time to be without a canopy, especially, you know, the tree's got to grow, right? We're not putting a mature tree in, it's a younger tree that takes time to grow and put that canopy back in place.
yeah, the problem is though that we've seen it, if it's there for 2 or 3 years, 3 or 4 years, then they come in, they do their work, they'll kill the tree.
Yeah, no,
They're making allowances now. They're changing the contract language so that they're more focused on trees. They have been focused on streets and sidewalks and curbing.
But they have, yeah,
Focused on trying to get extra width in the sidewalks, becoming ADA compliant in the sidewalks, right? So that's been their focus. Now we've asked them to build into their plan, consider tree planting. So develop with their plan, a tree planting plan that shows that they allowed enough room on the grass strip for planting trees. And if they can't provide enough room on the grass strip for planting trees, then look at the backside of the sidewalk where they can pull the sidewalk to the curb and provide a little bit more space in the back of the sidewalk to plant the tree. So they're really starting to integrate tree planting into their road work and sidewalk work. At the end result, you'll have a much better street because it will look better. It'll be all done over and you'll get trees that are planted appropriately.
and Dave's driven a lot of that from our side because we've been very aggressive about the tree planting stuff. We've been very aggressive about the tree trimming and removals of hazard trees, but also the tree planting.
Yeah,
So one of our missions has been that we don't, you know, we replace every tree we take down. So we need to make sure that the town, we're working in conjunction with each other because as Dave said, and Mr. Engels, that street was on a plan that Dennis and Dave were working on. And the engineering department came in, oh, we're gonna do sidewalks and water and everything there. So, you know,
yeah.
that part of it's now, they're closing the loop on that.
So it's something, Tom, that really didn't exist, but because they're doing so much work in town, we ran into an issue where we had a conflict, right? Where it was a beautiful street that was all done over, had no trees on it. We planted trees on one side under the wires. The tree warden planted trees on the other side. And then they came in and they narrowed the sidewalks. They closed up the space. There was a significant impact to the trees that people had to go back and make sure they survived through this season. So we definitely don't want that to happen. And then we evaluated a couple other locations where they did not take existing trees into consideration. And we pointed that out to them and they damaged the trees and they did some things that probably could have been done a little bit better to make it more aesthetically pleasing and more healthy trees would grow there. So they've addressed those, right? They've built that into their contract language. That's a focus for their folks as well. Not to just worry about, you know, blinders on and sidewalks, curbs and, you know, we're working with them, not because it's a utility conflict, which is our primary goal. And it's also trying to make sure that they look good. And now we're coordinating with the town to make sure that they last, you know, and they're planted appropriately. So it's been an ongoing effort and it's unfortunate that, you know, Mr. Engels experienced that, but we do plant and replant and remove hundreds of trees. And every once in a while we have a hiccup, but there's a very comprehensive plan that goes on that we try to make sure that the right thing is done for the community.
appreciate that. On the non-rejected streets, what's typically the time frame from, we take down a tree to the planting of the replacement
We
tree?
do spring and fall,
Spring and fall, okay.
spring and fall planting. Yeah, so right now we just finished up 50 trees for the fall planting. So we're looking at the trees for the next spring. Yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
any other questions on this or? Thank you, Stephen, for joining us.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, I think that brings us to the fiscal year 2022 audit presentation.
I can introduce that.
So Zach Fentros from Melanson comes in every year just after Labor Day and does the audit. They also come out to do the inventory and whatnot prior to. The audit is presented normally in November for the last 4 or 5 years or so. And Zach will talk about the fact that it's in draft form still and all that. And he can explain all that.
Certainly will. Okay, well, I'm going to share my screen and I've got a set of financial statements up on my screen. So if you could all just let me know if you can see the screen, that would be fantastic.
We can see it.
Perfect. So as Mark said, my name is Zach Fentros. I'm the audit manager in charge of the Wakefield Municipal Gas and Light Department's fiscal year 2022 audit. So tonight I'm going to go through the financial statements. I'm going to highlight some certain account balances and some trends. And if at any point anybody has any questions, please feel free to stop me and I can hopefully address your questions at that time. Before we jump in, there's a couple things I'd want to note. And the first is that you'll see on some of the pages in the financial statements, there are items that are highlighted in yellow. All the items highlighted in yellow are in relation to the net pension liability. And these figures are presented as of the prior year. They will need to be updated. Unfortunately, we can't update those at this time because the information is not available to us. And that information is in relation to the Wakefield Contributory Retirement System. And that information is generally made available, and that audit of that is completed sometime after year end. So maybe January or early February, we'll get that information and we'll be able to update the financial statements to reflect that current information. So again, just the items highlighted in yellow, and I'll be able to point a few of them out as we go through. And then the other item I wanted to bring to your attention is I think it's important to have kind of a takeaway or a conclusion from my presentation here tonight. And I think the takeaway in the conclusion should be that the department has a pretty tight cash position, but the department also had positive operating results of operations. The department has a very well-funded OPEB trust fund. And then there's no management letter. And I'll take a second to expound on the no management letter. So in addition to proving out the numbers and the figures in the financial statements, we also look at the internal controls of the department to make sure that the assets are being appropriately safeguarded. And if there were any issues with those internal controls, we would issue a formal management letter where we recommend improvements to the internal controls or the financial reporting. And about 10% of Melanson clients don't receive a management letter. So it's pretty rare to not receive a management letter from Melanson. So that really speaks to how serious Mark, Pete, and their teams take their internal controls and make sure that they're operating effectively to receive a management letter. I'm going to turn to the first page, and I'll jump right on into the first page after the table of contents. And this is the first page of the independent auditor's report. The department received a clean opinion, which is the best opinion you can receive from an independent auditor. And it's the same opinion that the department has received in prior years. Next, I'm going to skip a few pages down to page 5. And page 5 is the first page of the management's discussion and analysis. And the management's discussion and analysis takes place on pages 5 through 8. And essentially, this is just a narrative summary of the results of operation. And this section also discusses any major financial areas or trends. So instead of just simply sitting here and reading this to you, I'd actually like to jump to page 9, which is the statement of net position or the balance sheet for the department. And on page 9 and 10, and maybe some other pages, we're going to discuss the same things that are discussed here in the management's discussion and analysis. So we'll shoot right down to page 9. So again, this is the statement of net position, but it's essentially just a balance sheet. It's your assets, your liabilities, and then you have your, fund balance here at the bottom. And as you can see, there are 3 line items that are highlighted yellow, as I previously stated, and all 3 of these items are in relation to that net pension liability. So as you can see that these financial statements have comparative totals. So we have your 2022 information, as well as the 2021 information. And as you can see that your deferred outflows, your net pension, and your deferred inflows related to pension all have the same balances. And again, that's because that information is not available to us at this time, but when that information is available, these figures will be updated. And we have a little note here at the bottom, kind of explaining that with this one kind of footnote. So I think where I'll start is we'll come right up to the top. I'll zoom in a bit. And I think what I want to note first is that these columns present both the Wakefield Municipal Gas and Light Department as well as the Wakefield Municipal Cooperative Corporation information together. They're consolidated and presented in one column. The breakout between what is the Wakefield Municipal Gas and Light Department and what is the Wakefield Municipal Cooperative Corporation can be found on pages 47 through 49. I don't want to jump there now, but just wanted to bring that to your attention that if you wanted to see a breakdown to what's really the cooperative corporation and what's the municipal gas and light department, that can be found on pages 47 through 49. It'll provide you with those columns as well as a column that'll tie right back to this page. Now, the first item I want to bring to your attention is actually the very first item at the top. It is this unrestricted cash and short-term investments, and that had a balance of $1,002,000. So you can see it's actually about a $1.3 million decrease from the prior year. Now, this decrease is due to the increased cost of purchase power that the department saw in fiscal year 2022. So as rates were increasing, the department made a cognitive decision to not increase their rates on a one-for-one basis, but rather stagger that over a period of time and drawing down on the cash during that process. And I think when we get to the income statement, that'll be a bit more clear. But essentially, the department chose not to increase the rates to match what was the actual costs. So not to provide a big jump in rates to your customers from one month to the next, and rather you smooth it out over a couple months. But while that smoothing process was happening, you drew down on your unrestricted cash position, which is why you see that decrease. Now, I had mentioned in the start that the department does have a pretty thin cash position. And an analysis that we like to do is we like to look at your unrestricted cash plus your receivables. So we have the 1 million, and I can actually pull this up over here. So we like to look at cash of this 1,002,000 plus your accounts receivable for 3.7 million. And then what we do is we subtract out your accounts payable of 4.9, which kind of gives you a quick ratio, if you will. As you can see, that's actually in a deficit 165,000. And then what we like to do is if we come down to the income statement, which is just the next page, we take the total operating expenses of 35,835,000, which you can see right here, less depreciation expense of 5 million or 5.3 million, comes up to the average on an annual basis. Your department will have on average about 30,500,000. So on a monthly basis, that's about 2.5 million in expenses on a monthly basis. So what we do is we compare a little bit of a ratio to see how much cash or short-term or quick assets do you have on hand to cover your monthly expenses. And what we like to see for an industry average and what we recommend is about 3 months. And as you can see here, you have less than 1 month. It is a very tight position. Last year, that ratio was at 1 month. And currently that ratio has decreased due to primarily the decision by the department to draw down on your unrestricted cash has really brought that to a very razor thin position. So I wanted to make sure that you were all aware of that and cognizant of that fact. The next item I want to bring to your attention, again, I'm back on page 9, which is your statement in that position, is this land and construction in progress. And that is a balance of 1,904,000. It's actually about a $1.2 million increase from the prior year. Now, that increase is primarily due to some upgrades on substations that the department did in fiscal year 2022. It's my understanding that this substation was running at a smaller voltage, and it was increased on a higher voltage to be more efficient and more reliable. That project was not complete as of the end of June 30, 2022, which is why it's sitting here in this land in construction in progress. When that project is complete, it'll come down here, one line item below, to your other capital assets net of accumulated depreciation. So your other capital assets net of accumulated depreciation has a balance of $49,715,000. It's actually a decrease of about $960,000 from the prior year. Now, that decrease is primarily due to your depreciation expense exceeding your current year additions. So in 2022, the department spent about $4.8 million on additions. So at the beginning of the year, you started with about 50 million. You had 4.8 million in additions, but your depreciation expense over the year was about 5.3 million, which is why you see that decrease in this line item. Now, some of the major capital asset expenditures that took place in 2022 was about 1.3 million for some gas mains, 525,000 for gas meters, 850,000 for some new regulating equipment for gas. The department also spent 354,000 on transportation equipment, 321,000 on transformers. So those were some of the major capital improvements that the department made during fiscal year 2022. Moving down into the liabilities, the first one I want to bring to your attention is this loans payable net of current portion. This is essentially the loans and bonds, think of them more or less as the same way, but it has a balance of $12,932,000. It's actually a decrease of about $2.4 million from the prior year. Now, that decrease is due to your principal payments that were made on those loans that were outstanding. Now, the reason I really wanted to bring this to your attention is that users of their financial statements will look at this figure and see how much of this debt will be paid off within 10 years. And what they like to see is between 70-75% of debt being paid off within 10 years. They consider that a good financial position for a community to be in. And as of June 30, 2022, Wakefield Municipal Gas and Light is actually going to be able to pay off 98% of your debt within the next 10 years. So that's going to be viewed pretty favorably by your users of the financial statements and be viewed as a pretty strong position for the department to be in. Right below this, we have the net pension liability. Again, this is presenting as of the prior year balance. I just wanted to note that what this really represents is the total, the department's proportional share of the total unfunded liability for the Wakefield Contributory Retirement System. And as again, I'm beating a dead horse here, but when that information becomes available, this figure will change. Right below that, you have your net OPEB liability. And that has a balance of 93,000. It's actually a decrease of about 326,000 from the prior year. Now, OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. Essentially, this is the health insurance, the future anticipated health insurance payments for the department. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to jump real quick here to page 46, because I think that there is a great illustrative example here in the back. Now, this is some required supplementary information in relation to your OPEB liability. So the department actually hired an actuary to determine what the total liability was. And that actuary determined this total OPEB liability to be $7.5 million. And again, that's the future health insurance for your active and your current retirees. However, the plan has already put aside in your fiduciary net position $7.4 million, which leaves you with that net liability of $93,000. And what's really important here is that fiduciary net position, how much is the funding percentage? You're at now almost 99% funded. That is exceedingly rare in the Commonwealth to have a funding percentage that high. Most towns and cities are anywhere from 0 to 10%. Light departments are what your contemporaries are at are anywhere from 25 to 40%. So that Wakefield Municipal Gas and Light to have a liability that's essentially 99% funded is a very strong position financially for the department to be in. And again, will be viewed very favorably by your users of the financial statement. So again, that should be a big takeaway that, you know, the department is in rare standing, because most communities and even your contemporary light departments aren't sniffing anywhere close to 99% funding. So again, that is a very strong position for the department to be in. I'm going to jump back to the statement in that position, and that's everything I wanted to kind of discuss here. I'm going to jump to the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in depositions, which is just the next page. And essentially, this is the income statement for the department. And what's important to note here, I think, is your operating revenues compared to the first two items here, your cost of purchase electricity, as well as your cost of purchase gas. So we'll focus on the electric first. So the department had electric sales of 27,355,000. It's actually an increase of about 560,000 from the prior year. Now that increase was primarily due to the increase in the cost of purchase electricity. Now the cost of purchase electricity had a total expenditures of 15,394,000. So about a $1.6 million increase from the prior year. Now this increase was due to the both the supply and the price volatility within the global energy markets that you know, I think we're all pretty well aware of at this point in time. So you know, as I was saying before, with the unrestricted cash, your costs increased by about 1.6 million, but your sales only increased by about 960,000. So that delta between the increase for your purchase electricity and the revenue that actually came in for electricity really can be seen as that reduction in that unrestricted cash. Very similarly, you have gas sales net of discounts of 11,190,000. That's actually an increase of about 1.4 million from the prior year. And just like the electricity, your cost of purchase gas right here has a balance of 6,921,000, which is an increase of about 2.2 million from the prior year. So again, due to the supply and price volatility, you saw an increase in the cost of purchase gas. A portion of that was you know, passed along to your customers here. But then again, that delta, that difference between what was recognized by the department and what was, you know, passed along to your customers, that offset really went to your unrestricted cash, which is why you see that decrease in your unrestricted cash. And that really concludes everything I wanted to bring to your attention here tonight. I guess I'll open it up to any questions, comments, or concerns.
Are there any questions, comments, or concerns? Is there, so we know that the costs of electricity and natural gas are probably going to continue to increase. And we're running pretty tight. What is our plan to mitigate that?
You're not going to have to charge our customers
It's a
for.
one-way street.
So,
We already weeded down the cushion, so now the only way to manage it is that we're going to have to charge everything for it.
so when is that going
it's
into effect?
Ongoing.
It's ongoing, correct?
Literally, we have that
But I
discussion
mean, will it be more in real time moving forward?
Yes, because
month to month to month.
yeah, the idea is that we don't want to over collect too much, but we can't be caught. So we're, you know, the IOUs try to do it on 6-month buckets, but we have the flexibility to do it, you know, on a more real-time basis based on what we're actually seeing in our hedging.
Yep.
So that we don't over impact customers if we don't have to. So.
With the, you know, I know you said we're kind of smoothly transitioning and drawing down that cash. With costs going up, what is kind of the plan to kind of smoothly, you know, bring the
smoothing's over.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously we need to bring our free cash back up to a more comfortable
We're
level.
gonna try to survive the winter without trying to recover all the cash. Yeah, we want to.
I don't think this is the environment,
Yeah,
rising prices, to actually try to make headway on the cash business. I mean,
yeah. It's already gonna be up enough, so we're gonna just try to keep our head above water as much as we can. Try to recover at least maybe get to a more, you know, more than a full months of reserve if we can, but Mark's watching it, we watch it on a daily basis now, because, it's so volatile and going into the winter. I think if you look at where we stand relative to the IOUs, we're in slightly better position because we're allowed to hedge our positions, and they have to actually go out to bid for it in large blocks. So we're a little bit, so hopefully, MWEC's here tonight to talk about our electric side, and then Mark will be here next month to talk, Mark Roberts will be here for the gas side. So we're doing everything that we can to try and stay on top of it, but in terms of cushioning the blow, we've cushioned as much as we can.
Yeah.
And kind of long term, we won't come down as fast, I'm guessing, as, to kind of build that reserve.
Hopefully
back
we can,
up,
yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully the energy markets get better, but, long term forecasting is not bearing that out.
Right now, it's, the numbers are extreme, and hopefully, I mean, one of the biggest things that would help is if we had a relatively mild winter, because then the prices tank quickly if we have a relatively. By the same token, the one thing I've seen in the past 15 years, and I don't know if, when Matt and Justin talk about it in a minute, but one of the things I've seen over the past 15 years is that the cold streaks will, in a winter month will really jack up the prices in the short term, but they'll level off as soon as you get to that mild weather again. And so, these spikes, they're predicted for the entire winter, but it's more likely to be snapshots in time, 15 or 20 days in that cold polar vortex of 17, as opposed to the entire winter. So we're hopeful that, there's going to be the ups and downs, and it's not going to be, it comes up to, 40% for the entire winter and it comes back down again. I think what you're going to see is some volatility. So, and like I said, Mark and I are looking at it every day and trying, so when we set the fuel charge, we're working hard to not have it go through the roof, but by the same token, we got to make sure that,
Got to pay the bills, right?
yeah.
And certainly Wakefield isn't the only community going through this. They're the only 6/30/2022 that I have, but seeing others, over the, November, December, and October of last year started, drawing down on their reserves as well to help with their customers, smooth that increase in price over. So Wakefield is not alone in this struggle.
So
Do you have a hand up?
I think that's
Oh, no, I think-
mouse.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Usually we take a contingent vote to approve the audit, and then we share with you once the final numbers come in from Zach. Unless there's any significant change, we share you, and we just, we'll.
As part of the potential rate increases, and I don't think it's avoidable. How much of that is attributed to material and commodity increases, meaning all the.
Less so than the actual commodity.
Oh, okay.
Relative to the commodity itself, it's really the commodity that's driving it.
Any other questions or comments?
And thank you for putting this together. It's informative every year, and again, appreciative to Mark and your staff and Pete, and every year having no management letter is, again, I'll echo that how well that is, and then the funding of being at 98%. That's just kind of unheard of as well. So I think that's just.
Yeah, and so, when you balance the cash stuff with the fact that some of these other indicators, the loans that we've been working hard to pay down, and the OPEB situation. So we do, there are some strong positions too that help us out a little bit going forward.
On the loans, I mean, all the rate increases, are we on variable rates on those? Or is it-
No.
Okay. Because I know a lot of.
So we're in really good.
A lot of places are on
I don't know if you remember last year, we,
building.
this building, we refinanced it over the final, we did a fixed term with Matt Ide's help, actually, we termed it out for a final 8 years, was it, I think?
Yep.
So we shortened the term of the loan and we locked in the rate, because it was gonna come up for another, it was good timing because it was on a 5-year variable. And so it would have reset again in 4 more years had we not termed it out for the full 8 years.
Yeah. It's good.
And that was with Matt's help, so he's on there somewhere, so.
So these are the rates that like it all of $16, $15, $16, but I mean, with 3%, I mean, you can't beat that. No.
Yeah.
So.
So, and those terms were pretty lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, if you don't mind saying that a little bit louder, so other folks.
Oh, so I.
Side-
No, he was-
Elton had just kind of asked a question about the interest rate on all of the long-term debt. And if you look at page 23, it's in the 3% range on, roughly $15 million worth of debt. So.
Yeah.
I just was mentioning it out and you really can't beat that.
Yeah. Our facility was termed out at what, 2.9?
2.9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that would have adjusted in just over 4 more years.
4 years.
We had 4 years, and so it wasn't going down.
Okay.
So we'll do,
Anything else? Do we need to vote?
yeah,
I'll make a motion to vote on the financial statement for 2022.
I will second that.
And so we're voting to accept
except the audit.
the audit. Okay. Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Kursey, aye.
Great.
Thank you.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Zach, too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zach.
Thank you. If you just give me a quick second, I want to thank Mark, Pete, and the entire team over at Wakefield. Audits are not an easy undertaking. And this is the second audit for the 6/30 year end that we've had completed. Sorry, Mark, someone beat you this year. But normally Wakefield's
But it
number
wasn't
one.
Reading though, right?
It was not Reading. Reading
All right,
is a
that's all
12/31
that
year end. I
We
believe
have
it was the
head-to-head
Vermont.
competition.
It was the Vermont housing something or other beat
right.
you guys this year, and I don't do the audit, so kudos to you folks for getting your audit done and turned around as quickly as you do. It is not a small undertaking, it takes a lot of work, so kudos to Mark and his team. So thank you for being well prepared and making it a bit even easier process.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
We had a friendly rivalry with Reading every year because Reading always was very proud that they were first. So it was like the 3rd or 4th year I was here, like, we will beat Reading.
All right, so we're on to old business, project updates, and the energy park.
Yeah. So I think, that the town meeting is coming up on the 19th, I believe it is. Obviously, we're working in parallel paths on a few things on the energy park. We have a vote from town council and from the planning board for the town meeting. We have begun working on drafting of the legislation that we would seek from the State House on the home rule petition. Tom Mullen and Mike McCarthy are working on that as we speak to get that pre-reviewed at the State House, at the House and Senate Council level, so that hopefully, once we get the town meeting approval and in parallel path with that, the one other vote we're gonna need is of the Conservation Commission. So Mike's working on setting us up to be at that meeting as well to get their support. So that's from an approval perspective, that's one of the issues. We had a good meeting with the legislators, all three, the Senate and the 2 reps. And one of the things they talked about was the fact that one of the things I want to see at the state level is if we're taking an acre, a replacement of an acre. And so Steve's working on that. But one of the things that we are going to recommend, contingent on the fact that we get this land, would be to convert the land that we just retired, the substation at Burns, to become Burns Park. And I think that would go a long way towards the goal of, because even though it's a smaller landmass and we can identify other pieces, the fact that we would have a park right away as opposed to just some land that was never going to be a park. Steve and Mike both felt that that would go a long way. So our recommendation is that, and we've actually had a rendering done, Riley Landscaping, we had them look at like a way we could, and there was a lot of thought that went into how to lay this out. This site of land that's currently a substation, we could convert that. If you're aware of where it is on Ballister, if you haven't drive by it, it's kind of off of Albion and it's in between apartments and you'll see the substation there right now. But this had a lot of thought put into it in terms of both passive recreational use, green space, management of water. There was a lot of thought that went into how to lay this out. So we're going to share this with the town as well. But we would need a contingent vote of the board to say that the board would surplus the land to the town as long as we end up getting the easement. If we don't get the easement, then I would recommend that we hold this land for some future use that might involve other, renewable energy issues. So.
I have a question just about the layout here. So access to this is kind of interesting because where it looks like it's coming out here, that there's a path, is actually a driveway that right now says private property, do not enter. So is there an anticipation that you'd be able to access this
Yes,
park?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah, so the pathways are where they go off on both sides, I'll call that the north and south side. We're anticipating that would lead into a walkway to those developments, those either the condos or the apartments. So they would have access to it. The one you're referencing does not have any green space really. The one on the north side does have, in the front of the building has some green space, but that one where it would lead to does not. So they would probably use the park more than other areas, other groups. And then across the street, they have, I'm not sure what they have, but it doesn't appear they have a lot of green space because they have the parking lot, but they would just have to walk across the street to Ballister and then walk into the.
So the curb cuts on the Ballister
Yeah.
side are public curb cuts, but the
Right.
two sides are, yeah.
Yeah.
But we anticipate, that because it's no longer going to be a commercial use, that they would be amenable to the fact that this becomes,
Yep. Exactly.
And maybe just thinking too far down, I'm looking at the street view. Would we be asking the town to put, where those paths come in, crossing Ballister where the driveway is now, or wherever that path entrance to put like a crosswalk there, at least painted on
I'm
make
sure
it accessible as possible,
there's
right?
probably going to be a requirement that ties into it. So again, this was a preliminary drawing that Brett Riley did for us to kind of give an idea of what it would look like. And he gave there was a lot of thought that went into how to lay it out in terms of, a grassy area with trees, and then the two sides are really meant to manage water at the site, permeable pathways. The area at the top around the curve there would be bench, like you could actually sit, and so if the kids playing on the grass, you could sit, So I think there's a lot of thought to the different ways to lay this out and actually make this a very desirable, not just a wooded area, but a very desirable public space.
Okay. And is there, I know we've had a substation there for a while. Are there any concerns with any sort of contamination?
Yeah, that was the reason we held up even talking about this, is that there is some contamination cleanup, but it's about 150 grand right now, and we would have to clean it up anyway. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't $1 million, you know what I mean? So, and so we did sampling at the site, and we have an estimate from the
Two estimates in there in the ballpark, and they're
Okay.
a bit more than 100,000 each. Then on top of that, you had some other costs for engineering costs, soil analysis, and so it's around between 150 and 200 for the cost of the cleanup.
So it was important that we looked at, we didn't want to share with anybody until we were sure what we thought it would cost to kind of abate the site, so.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, to do the land swap, and, it's a betterment of the area as well. I think the park fits well in that area, and I'm looking at the street view and knowing that area, there isn't a lot of greenery there, so I think it's a great addition. With all of the other benefits with the energy park microgrid as well. So I appreciate
It's a very dense area.
Yeah.
There's a lot of apartments and condos there.
Yeah,
When this,
without their own land.
Right.
Yeah, it may be heavily utilized.
and it was multi-purpose too. When this came up, it was right as we were retiring Burns, and there's also a proper way to honor Mr. Burns now, because instead of a fenced-in empty yard for a while until we came up with some other appropriate use and some equipment there, converting it from Burns Substation to Burns Park would be a nice fitting,
There's one other thing that all this raised for me, which is you mentioned that we're going to be going before the Conservation Commission. And I know preliminarily what I had heard from them was that they wanted more information on the difference, if you will, between the carbon, the extra carbon output from cutting down the trees versus the carbon savings at the site over time. So I'm just giving you a heads up that I think that is.
Yeah, well, the carbon savings is going to be significant. Joe has the numbers on that, so I
And
think,
taking into account as well that the grid is going to be getting cleaner over
Yeah.
time.
yeah.
So those numbers are going to be very helpful to have, but might take a little bit to produce. I don't know how far you are on that, but
Well, we have the carbon savings just from the not having the tech go
right.
gas, so.
Yeah.
That's significant,
And I know that carbon savings or carbon emissions of trees is complicated. So that piece is always.
And I would
difficult.
almost argue to an extent, eventually the trees kind of zero out, because we're going to be replacing every tree that we take down. So, while it's not zero to start, right? Because you're taking mature trees and we're planting.
This is where it gets really.
Yeah, and I think it's, but.
I'm not an expert in carbon accounting for trees, but I will say it's extraordinarily complicated.
Yeah.
So I don't, but I am curious about what the magnitude of the difference looks like. So that would be good numbers to have in hand or be prepared with when you go in front of them. I noticed.
Get your arborist hat on, Joe.
Yeah, it's, that said, if it's a big difference, then, maybe some of the little tweaks to certain numbers don't matter. So I don't know what the relationship looks like between those two. I did notice that Bronwyn joined us, who's a member of the public. And I know she had asked me a number of questions actually about the energy park. I don't see her live, but one of the questions was about the cost, just getting kind of an up-to-date cost number in terms of what the cost of the energy park will be. So that's one thing to pass along. And then there were other questions too about the total size of the easement, which I believe is the 1 acre, but just
1
wanted to
acre.
kind of confirm what was going to be in the final materials that are going to be at the November town meeting.
Yeah, so we're seeking 1 acre. We're only going to utilize about 2/3 of it at the beginning. Down the road, if there was a technology that made sense, we would consider further developing the site, but it's not worth going through all this multiple times. So, it would be up to a board, a board vote in the future if we were going to expand any kind of additional, technology that would make sense for that site in the future.
Okay, great. And if you could just share at some point the current cost numbers, that would be great.
It's,
And
roughly 12 million.
okay,
And it depends on how we deal with the battery. So that's a variable right now, because it's still, the contracts, negotiations are still taking place. And then we have a budget number for the larger item, which next would be the generator, but that's, so the costs are, still fluctuating slightly, but the total cost of the project is roughly 12 million.
And we have to, if we were to pay cash out of pocket for all of it, but don't forget, there's options to lease to own the solar on both buildings. There's options to lease to own the battery.
Yep.
So there's ways to get our capital investment down in addition. But we haven't spent a ton of time on that until we get through this piece of it. It's not worth negotiating all these things right now and understanding. So at a macro level, we know what the macro cost is, but we can evaluate whether the cost to borrow to buy the battery versus the lease to own option is, which makes more business sense at the time.
I would also say for, in preparation for town meeting, obviously we have the macro costs. I think we, I know that we have some of the macro savings, and potentially put them into buckets of, here are the construction savings for the schools. Here is the, kind of big bucket annualized of the cost savings to the schools, the cost savings to us as well. So I think people want to balance the cost of the park cost at the macro level, 1 million, and the savings from a financial standpoint, and then all of the environmental benefits that it will bring as well.
Yeah.
So I think just having those pieces ready to go and as part of a presentation will go a long way.
Great.
Okay, is there anything else? Is there anything you need from us at this time?
Just a vote on Burns.
You do need a vote on Burns, okay.
Because we can go back to the town and say the board is taking a contingent vote to swap the land.
How is this worded here? Do we need to read this to do the vote? I don't want to construct this, Jen.
Yeah, we could do like the last 2 sentences of this, I think, of this summary, right?
All right.
Motion to.
I'd make a motion to allow the department to use the land from the retired Burns substation for the creation of a park to help reduce the land that would be used in the easement for the energy park. The department only grant the land if the easement is approved at the local and state level. I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Commissioner Corsi, aye.
Aye. Any against? Unanimous with Jack abstaining.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Again, we'll be posted on that over the next few weeks and months. But there's a lot of moving parts, obviously, but I still think at a global level, this is an exciting project for the town and for both the ratepayers and the citizens. And I think from an environmental perspective, granted, we can try to do some accounting for trees, but at the end of the day, I think, that school is going to be there for 40 years and we're going to drop their gas usage by at least, 100,000 CCF a year. And so that's going to have a long-term impact. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is one of those unique projects that's a win across the board, with everyone at the table benefiting from the school's infrastructure to the students, to the ratepayers, to the town, and all of the towns that participate as well. So I think and the environment. So
No accolades to Dave yet, but I got a text from the live deed meeting that was going on over the grant he applied for from the APPA, and it sounded like we did very well. So I haven't received official word yet, so I can't give him credit yet.
$12 million.
No, it's not, but it is a decent amount of money that will help with the educational.
anything else?
Yeah, I know.
But I was at the meeting and he said, I just heard your presentation for your deed application and it went very well and was very well received. So.
And I know that we're talking to our legislators as well, and I know that there are asks out there from them to appropriate potentially other sources of funding from the state and potentially the federal level. We made additional headway in there.
I think the biggest thing they can help us with right now is getting the home rule petition for us. Yeah. So we spent most of the time talking about that because it's really, there's two sides to it. We're gonna try really hard to get it in before the end of the year or beginning of the new session. If we haven't gotten it through by then, which is, the odds are not great, but they're still possible. If we haven't gotten it through by then it's probably gonna be the end of March, April, because once they turn over, it takes all the time to redo the committees and all that, and the state government works very, very, very slowly.
But we should say that, we should mention that we are pursuing grant dollars for the project
Yeah,
at the same time.
in multiple
Attended
avenues, yeah.
We've attended some seminars. Vinny has attended some to figure out what's out there, what's available.
It different.
Guide us through the process. So in parallel, we're definitely looking at it. But, you know, I mean, the ARPA money and whatever's available to federal and the state that we're looking at. The problem is that there's restrictions on some of those because some of them are shovel ready. But, you know, our shovel will go on the ground, we hope soon. And are there any restrictions with that if we start early, or do we have to wait till approval? So we're exploring that, but we are looking at additional grant funding for that project. So.
Yeah, there's lots of sources.
Right.
And it's just trying to find the right home. We've also talked to a grant writing consultant that might have some more specific knowledge about ones that are really, we might be able to get at the federal level.
And the project has been well received by everyone we talked to. So I feel pretty confident that it's somewhat unique. And that, you know, if we get to the right group, that, you know, we should have a good opportunity. So.
And I would if Bronwyn's still on the line, I would strongly encourage her to reach out to us and come in and really learn about the project. Because we'd love to share information. If she or a few of her friends have questions about this, call us up and come on and we'll lay it on the conference table and share all the information we have on it. So.
Thank you very much.
Bronwyn, did we answer your question, the questions that you have to date? Do you have anything else that you want to ask this evening?
Well, I just wanted to know where the easement is.
It is on Hemlock Road on the right-hand side. It's the last few hundred feet before you get to the guard shack heading into the tech.
Will the entire acre be the easement?
The entire acre will be the easement, but we will only be developing about 2/3 of it at this point.
It's the land is 6 acres of that the town owns, and we've only requested
An acre of it.
and we'll use 2/3 of that, at the beginning.
2/3 of the acre.
2/3 of the acre, correct?
Right. Okay, great. The only other question I had was, where is the substation that you were referring to, turning into a park possibly?
The Burns substation, which is on Ballister Street off of Albion Street.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Do you want to pull that up? I can try and zoom.
It's kind of hidden in between apartment entrances and stuff. If you were walking down Albion and took a left into the apartments right there, you'll see our substation. It's an old 4 kV substation that we're planning to retire. So we're either gonna hold the land for some future renewable use or trade it and create a park with it and put the renewables up at the energy park.
About how big is that substation?
8,000 square feet.
Yeah, that's 8,500 square feet. So it's not the full acre, but if you look at its location, it's well suited to become a park because it's a very congested area.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yep.
I did have a question on, if we don't get the home petition rule in before the end of this session, it moves into March, April, spring. How much in jeopardy in terms of material ordering, the park being ready and online for commissioning of the VOC? I know that we have the memorandum of understanding that, we'll be taking life science.
I think what we're gonna have to do.
Where are we getting in terms of that risk?
Generator lead time was moved out to roughly 112 weeks for the lead time of the generator. So if we order soon, it will be here when we need it. And the longer we push it out, that will be at risk. But, we could do something temporarily should that be a problem. The battery, I think, is okay for right now. But in all honesty, it's it's important to kind of move the process through so that we can place those orders for the equipment
One
because
of the things we'll have to look at is that if we order and it fell through, are there cancellation penalties? And how much risk is there? We're gonna really have to rely on Kate and Donald and Jason to tell us, is there a risk that this won't pass? Because we'll end up taking some risk and we're gonna have to take a risk reward analysis. And will there be cancellation charges if we were to order the generator and the battery and end up having to cancel for some reason? Like, what financial risk are we taking?
Yeah, and that's, just kind of the concern. Yeah, I know that some of these timelines are getting tight.
Yeah.
Based, I know it's only a couple of months
Oh,
now, but it's a lot.
Time.
We're talking 120 weeks plus, and I'm guessing that that's not going to reduce between now and the spring. I think it's only going to increase. So
So the generators last week, it was 112 with the max. So that increased from like a month before. So, it does. I mean, to have it slip, 1 month to another definitely has an impact.
Yeah, so the Burns substation, if you want to orient yourself on a map, is basically it's behind Evergreen Estates on Albion. So if you map 254 Albion Street, you'll see the driveway for Evergreen Estates, and it's basically straight back from there, all the way back to where that driveway meets Ballister Street.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other question?
Any other questions, everybody?
No, but I have to sign off. I'll be calling back in. You'll recognize me by the 508 number.
Okay.
All
Thank you
right.
for that.
Thanks, Phil.
that's what I got.
Okay. On to the next topic. This is the supply update from MWEC. Welcome, Matthew and Justin. Oh, we can't hear you, Matthew.
Matt's lost his audio.
Yeah, how about now?
That's
it's
better.
amazing when you take yourself off mute. Again, it's good to see everybody. My name is Matt Ide. I'm the Executive Director of Energy and Financial Markets here at MWEC. And it's my pleasure to introduce to the Commission, I think this is the first time many of you may have had the opportunity to meet Justin Cannell. Justin Cannell started at MWEC in September as our Director of Energy Markets. He'll be responsible for taking on, starting off with all the power supply and power portfolio management. Under his tutelage, we have a manager of commodities by the name of Dean Clark. Dean Clark's role, many of you may recall Steve Smith, but Steve left MWEC, and we have now a new manager of commodities in Dean Clark, who will be directly reporting to Justin, and then tying in the rest of the analyst team and market management and planning will all be following under Justin's leadership in that regard. So we're very excited to have Justin join us full-time in September. Prior to that, he was working with us on a consultancy basis for many months as we were kind of mapping out this transition to essentially add depth to our bench at MWEC and focus on the power supply matters at hand. So with that, I'll kind of give it to Justin, and he can take us through what we're looking at and what we're challenged with as it relates to the power portfolio.
Appreciate that, Matt, and very nice to meet you all. I'm actually going to share the slide deck. I'll do the share screen thing and basically just step through the slides. There's a lot in there. Let me do that because actually the lighting will get better before we even start. But, and of course I'm on wrong one. So I think this dovetails nicely from, unfortunately, it's a difficult conversation, but it's objective data from the financial statements. And what we put together for tonight is basically looking back at the recent history of some of the power supply portfolio costs, a little insight as to where we are right now, and then arguably, perhaps more important, looking at what does the future look like when we apply where that volatile energy market is and how that's going to prospectively impact the Wakefield power supply costs going forward. So like I said, there's a lot of material here. There's a lot of numbers. I'll try and take this at a high level and then dive down to the most relevant pieces, but please don't hesitate to ask any questions. Even for folks that do this every day, you know, there's a lot going on here. So happy to go through that. So with that being said, what we've got up here on the screen right now is basically a look back or review of what the actual power supply costs were for Wakefield for 2021. And when you look at power supply costs, I'm sure Matt's talked about the three legs to the stool, or really the three major line item expense components to that wholesale bill: energy, capacity, and transmission. And on the right-hand side, we have basically a table of all the different resources that Wakefield has made investments in or taken on obligations with in order to hedge out one component of those or another. And generally, it boils down to the capacity expenses and or the energy expenses. And those really do become the most volatile. But the main takeaway here is looking at the subtotal expense for 2021. And you can see that there was about $15 million worth of power supply expense and about $89 per megawatt hour. So when you translate that down to per kilowatt hour cost, that's about 9 cents. That's kind of where we were, right? And we're still in transition with 2022, but the financial year obviously covers, or the fiscal year obviously covers a portion of both. So that's kind of where we've been at.
I have a question on the megawatt column, and I'm assuming it's just the it says 2020. Is that just a labeling issue? It should say 2021 megawatt hour.
Yeah, I was catch that, but it doesn't matter how many times you review your own slides. That's an error there, but it is meant to be 2020. Apologize for that. So here's a forecast when we look at it on a monthly basis, basically 2022 out the balance of 2027. And really what's most important to look at here is these big orange spikes. Can everyone see my mouse? My mouse. Got COVID on the brain. But basically honing in on these orange spikes, that represents basically where energy costs are for the foreseeable years and where the liquid market for power is trading. So the energy component is that orange line that shows that extreme volatility and cost magnitude. The blue line here represents the capacity costs on a whole dollar basis going forward. So you can see the blue line is fairly stable, right? And that's largely driven by a lot of the investments that have been made in projects and other pieces, and the nature of the timeliness of how these capacity rates change in ISO. The gray line represents transmission expense. So again, not nearly as volatile, some seasonality to these expenses, but largely, flat as you look forward with some overall increases in costs. And this yellow line item here is really just your ISO and ancillary expenses, basically to pay the ISO grid operator largely to operate the grid. But the big thing that we're dealing with here, as noted by your audit team, was those energy expenses. And so basically how we model these energy expenses is we look at the expected kilowatt hour sales for any given month and what the underlying megawatt hours on a wholesale basis will have to purchase. We then say, okay, what long-term resources have been contracted for in order to basically hedge out a lot of those costs, whether it be participation in a nuclear unit or a solar farm or a wind project or hydro resources, to say now we know that we've got long-term investments in these energy assets that are going to fix out our energy prices and largely insulate us from that volatile spot market, which is largely driven by the price of natural gas, frankly. And we'll get into that a little bit. There's a piece that's then added on top of this, and we talk about what is that kind of hedge strategy to get you the predictability, but then also manage the ultimate cost that hits, the power bill at the end of the day that has to be recovered for through the rate system. And those are done on a shorter term basis, really buying from this liquid market that's out there that we have counterparties with, that you can see, here's how much a seller is willing to charge for that to be delivered during that period. So we put those in place over time and really in a layering fashion and do a dollar cost averaging methodology to basically time the market, but stick to a disciplined process to, again, remove as much of the risk as appropriate to design out as much of that cost volatility. But there is a intentionally designed, what we'll call open position. It's fairly small, generally about 15 to 20% of the overall power that gets settled in the spot market. And that's really where the largest exposure can come from, both on the high side and on the low side. But going forward, what you've seen basically in 2022 at the beginning is forecasted to continue, certainly in the next couple of years, even at a more exacerbated level as we go forward. So thinking about the balance between internal liquidity and rate management, but also doing whatever you can for the customer base. This is really where what we're dealing with the situation at hand. So let me stop there and just see if there's any questions in general, because I know we've only got through 2 slides, but there is a lot going on here.
Can you talk about the underlying assumptions that relate to costs peaking in 2023 and then declining every year thereafter?
Certainly. So I'll jump ahead a little bit here, just to kind of show you in general what's going on. There's not a phenomenon, but a market condition that's going on in the gas and power markets where power is more expensive the sooner you look out. So the further you look out to buy power, whether it's 26 or 27, right now is actually cheaper than buying power for 2023 and 2024, based on all the market forces and participants that are participating in this buy offer, bid offer type of marketplace. So the expectation underlying that is at some point there will be some return to normalcy or thereabouts, whether it's what's going on over in Europe or even internally, in the United States with some supply and demand issues that haven't necessarily caught up to each other. But over time, that is expected to be resolved and or settle into a more normal condition.
Just looking at that graph though. Oh, sorry, the other one that we were just on.
Sorry.
Am I right?
So I brought it up, but I didn't explain this. So that totally defeats the purpose of me doing that. So apologies. So really what to focus on here is, here's the forward price curve to go out and buy natural gas contracts. Put natural gas here because it is the most visible market going out there, but natural gas does drive the price of power. So when we look at basically natural gas delivered into New England, on the right-hand side of this slide, looking at basically every month, what is the cost of gas to be delivered into the region? So for this upcoming winter, not to get into numbers, but gas was at a point when this was run earlier in October, that gas was about $45 per MMBTU. So to translate that into power, generally multiply it about by 10 to come up with $450 per megawatt hour, or 45 cents a kilowatt hour, just for the energy component within the wholesale bill construct, above and beyond adding in the capacity and the transmission. But as you look out further into time, right, this next spike in the red occurs in the winter of 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, thereabouts. So that's really the situation where this whole energy market and largely gas market is propped up and being traded at these prices, and it's directly affecting the prices at which we can go out and secure power for in the forward market. To show some of that volatility, so 1 year ago is the blue line here, that same contract for gas was short of $15. So there's been a 300%, over 300% increase in the price of delivered gas. 6 months ago, it was about 25. So that just again shows how fast these kind of curves and future price of natural gas has run up. But ultimately, that is driving the situation on the power side and the electric side of, we need to go out and certainly hedge out this power risk, because as expensive as a lot of the power is trading for right now, there are situations in New England, especially, where power could get even more expensive than what's being traded for on the forward market. So you generally never want to go into a delivery period when you have to go buy and deliver electricity with more exposure of your kilowatt hour sales or wholesale load out on that wholesale market. Because there, again, like I said, and others have brought up, what it takes really is a weather event or extreme cold weather like a polar vortex or thereabouts to really set off like a domino set of effects that can jack up or increase the price of power significantly.
So what it looks like though to me is through, if I'm reading this right though, is that through 2031, we can still expect about $1.50 higher cost per MMBTU for gas than what we saw beginning of this year, which is why the cost of our portfolio has gone from $90 to $100 or more. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. And so great dovetail into, we now kind of, we put together the 22 forecast, 2022, which largely does take some of the actuals through the year. I think we have through August, and we put this together, but we also included updated balance of the year costs based on where those, again, open positions or that forward energy market is trading. But what you can see here is effectively that we're seeing we had a peak in August, prices spiked again, largely due to natural gas shortages throughout the area and taking delivery. But as we move into the balance of the year, at the end of the year, in December, we're seeing that winter pricing being reflected in the expected cost of power delivered. But you're 100% right. Sorry to jump around here. If in 2021, electric expenses were about 9 cents a kilowatt hour, we're going to see settlement of around 11 cents per kilowatt hour for 2022, and even higher in 2023 based on where that forward market is trading of about 11.5 cents per kilowatt hour. As we move forward, a little bit of kind of price relief, if you will, but like you mentioned before, given where those forward gas curves and accompanying power curves are, there's still a significant elevation, certainly what has been realized over the past few years.
Did these long-term power costs take into account any shift in our generation mix away from gas? Any significant shift, or is it pretty much just held at the current mix?
So it does take into account the change in mix over time. The challenge becomes, especially in New England, because we are in an ISO territory, or not territory, but governance structure. The way that power prices are set are basically expensive generator on at the time sets the price that everyone pays to all the generators. And so right now in New England, there's about 2/3 of the generation is largely gas-fired combined cycle power plants. So within the kind of bid stack based on economic dispatch, it's going to take a lot of things to happen over time to really move us away from natural gas and ultimately that gas-fired generator from setting that settled price of power that everybody pays. So certainly in the next decade, there isn't a significant forecasted change or expected change in that, because a lot of the resources that are coming online, right, are renewable, are going to be large-scale wind or solar. They're basically bidding into the market almost at a zero cost because they have no underlying fuel expense. But there still is that large stack of gas-fired generators that will probably be what they call the marginal unit, or the unit that's the most expensive unit online at the time, that'll set the price that everybody ultimately pays. So while that, like I said, like that change in kind of generation mix is factored into the forward market in theory and in practicality, there really isn't forecasted to be enough change in the foreseeable future to really change the mechanics of how that pricing is set.
Matt, at a macro level, Matt's been very involved in the offshore wind stuff. I mean, from what I'm seeing, that these major offshore wind projects are slipping a little bit in terms of timing, and their impact, as Justin was just saying, is still out there in the 27, 28, 29 timeframe before we expect to see any impact. Am I right, Matt?
That's totally right, Pete. We're going to get into kind of some of those projects and how we envision them fitting in the portfolio, but the financial impact of them is beyond the 5-year forecast period that Justin's showing you now. We're looking at the impacts of those things starting. The earliest they could potentially start would be like 28, 29. Realistically, they probably won't be hitting your portfolio until 2030 and 31, 32.
So would it be correct to say that the main point of leverage that we have as a muni is to build our own projects so that we don't need to purchase power from ISO?
That's right. The vertically integrated business model that MLPs enjoy is your best defense. And it's hard to see it in these charts because we, obviously see the costs increasing. But if you think about how we hedge, at the end of the day, approximately 80% of your power is coming to you under some type of a long-term, relatively stable price. And these fluctuations, because the actual prices have fluctuated to such a degree, these big fluctuations and swings are really occurring as a result of 20% of your overall portfolio is causing that fluctuation. And Pete mentioned this earlier. Imagine an investor-owned utility that cannot hedge. That's why you're seeing those phenomenally high swings in rates for the IOUs, because 100% of their portfolio is now exposed to these price fluctuations.
So what are our plans to build more stuff? More cheap stuff.
Yeah. I think we'll get to that in a few more slides.
Yeah, how do we take that volatility out of that 20%?
Yeah. But, just to expound on that a little bit here. So we kind of covered that natural gas does set the price of power in New England. We all know that natural gas costs have increased significantly over the last year. So some of the things on the electric side that we've seen, or electric power side driving that, is, really what appears to have happened is basically the summer of 2021, as a lot of the restrictions got lifted, saw a lot more just economic activity in general picking up in kilowatt hour sales. So a lot of that was fueled or supplied by natural gas fired generators. So there was a lot more natural gas generators coming online so increasing demand significantly. Because of kind of the reduced economic activity, we saw a lot of gas production basically come offline. So as the demand came back, the supply wasn't quite there to kind of meet up with it. So we started drawing further down on storage, if you will, well, literally storage. And at the same time, or towards the winter of that, we had a little bit of cold weather in January. We had the Ukraine and Russia stuff pick up the beginning of the year, which drove gas prices even higher. Now, one thing that we have seen over the last decade or so is kind of a price mitigation cap, if you will, to gas. Is on the power side, when gas becomes too expensive, a lot of the generators, especially in the Midwest, will switch from gas to coal, or they'll turn their coal plants on. So artificially and realistically reduce the demand on the gas side. That didn't happen between a lot of just people shuttering plants for either environmental and regulatory reasons or just economic reasons. So it kind of exacerbated kind of the situation where we didn't have the gas demand destruction. At the same time, too, with what's going on over in Ukraine and Europe in general, the LNG market just went through the roof. And so there was a big push and a maximization of trying to export as much LNG, frankly, from the States going over to Europe, where they could get paid 60, 70, sometimes $80 an MMBTU. So the gas that otherwise would have gone into storage is now being sent over to Europe and making quite a bit of money. Obviously, that's still the case. So a big impact, right? There's a big LNG facility that caught fire in June, so it's no longer able to export, which actually caused the market to drop significantly. It's since it came back up, but that's really the situation that's going on there. So there's a tight gas market, and you guys sell gas, so you know this very well. But one thing that's been particularly interesting on the power side is it, just like coal in the Midwest has been kind of a price cap mitigation tool. Oil was always looked at that way in New England, but after last winter, the oil tanks are actually the lowest they've been for the generation fleet in New England. And we're already pipeline constrained from bringing gas in when it gets really cold. So when we talk about kind of the the risk of what could happen under certain scenarios, you could see a really cold street stretch of weather where we can't get as much gas as we really need to. So you fire up the oil plants. They don't necessarily have the inventory to run for an extended amount of time. The last piece of or last line of defense really does become, LNG imports of bringing liquefied natural gas into Boston. And, what is that price going to be? Is it going to be at the $50, $60, which translates into, 50, 60 cents per kilowatt hour power. So a lot of that is largely priced into that forward power market because that is kind of the risk factor. But as of right now, it appears that some of the longer term weather forecasts are showing that it should be somewhat mild, at least the beginning of winter. So that should provide some, at least short-term relief and allow us to continue to build storage. But again, in New England, it becomes that risk of 1 or 2 weeks of really cold weather, to Pete's point, is all it takes to really set the total average prices for these contracts, through the roof. So that's still something that, we're actively watching. I mean, the portfolio for Wakefield and the MWEC membership in general, is hedged out to close off the majority of those open positions, albeit it's at a larger price, but we're still up against, that risk factor of we got to protect ourselves against really what could be significant price blowouts. And while it's, low probability, it's certainly high impact. And like Matt said, because of the vertically integrated business model, a lot of the smart investments that have been made, from the Wakefields and others, it appears that the MLPs are not in as bad a place. Certainly when you see National Grid that announced they're going to have a 64% rate increase starting yesterday. And then Unitil and Eversource shortly to follow. I think Unitil changes their rates in December. Haven't seen what those final numbers are, and then Eversource on January 1st. Now, moving along, we talked about just kind of a snapshot, different points in time of where that gas market is, and certainly feeding into just the energy costs in general. And moving on to, dovetailing into, all right, so what are those longer term potential solutions and how do they fit within the portfolio of Wakefield, especially considering, right, the GGES requirements and making sure that power portfolios are 50% carbon free by 2030, 75% in 2040, and 100% by 2050. So we did a couple new things this year with these reports that we publish on an annual basis to really provide that outlook to show here's where for the foreseeable future we expect the power portfolio to be from a non-carbon emitting standpoint. And so here's Wakefield's kind of status quo, that here's what we believe the future to look like, assuming that we expect to continue on certain contracts that are already built into the portfolio. So Wakefield from a 2050 or 2030, 50% reduction standpoint does appear to be in a very strong position with some additional REC optionality to convert things into carbon free or not emitting power. Going out further, there's still some certainly work to do in 2040 and thereabouts in 2050, obviously. We do have, some millstone licensing, not concerns, but just actual licensing expirations, which we expect to be extended in 2045. But we've got to take a prudent look with that going forward. But this is also assuming that, there's relatively no load growth. And I think everyone realizes through beneficial electric technologies, there is an expectation that there will be load growth over time, offset a little bit by distributed energy resources, whether it is rooftop solar or increased energy efficiency activity. But when you look at what ISO and others are predicting or projecting for the future, they're thinking that there's going to be about a 1.4% year-over-year increase in electric load due to those different factors. So when we do apply that growth factor to Wakefield's expected kilowatt hour sales, we modeled in, I think, to start in 2028. And then obviously annually compounded going forward, it starts to stress test a little bit of the non-carbon emitting position as we look ahead. So that 2030, in fact, actually does start to look a little bit tighter. Again, not a key, but at least I think you need to put these scenarios in place to say what happens if and be prepared for that particular situation. Because all it does is really compound the expected gap or positions that we need to close with those non-emitting resources. So let me stop there and just see if there's any questions. Just taking the next view out to 2050 and now starting to apply what happens if there is an electrification scenario, and that is that 1.4%. I think it's fairly straightforward, but.
Does this account for, you mentioned distributed energy resources reducing our load needs. Does this account for any increase in those resources over this time period?
It does. It takes a net approach to say, okay, on average in general, how much basically electrification are we going to see? And then what is that going to be offset by a combination of those distributed resources and energy efficiency? So just to put numbers to it, it would effectively assume that maybe 2.5% load growth due to electrification, but then that's going to be offset by a little bit more than 1% by those distributed resources and energy efficiency activities. So it kind of packages them together the way some of the national agencies and ISO New England are expecting it or modeling it.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. That was a good question. So now that the fun starts to happen and putting the sausage together, at least prospectively, and this is largely illustrative, we've been having separate discussions that are more fine tuning these volumes. And what we've put now in here is basically expecting that load growth and the compromised carbon-free position over time, based on some of the projects and some of the different filings that we've seen in certain opportunities to participate within those. How do we start to model or put in place participating, and what does that impact? So like you said, are there large offshore wind opportunities and or potential, contract supplemental with some of the nuclear units and or anything that we're hearing about? And obviously, as the more real it becomes, we can put more finite data in here to model. But right now, we're going through an exercise, and actually, Pete and Mark will be reaching out shortly to schedule a more focused meeting on this. Here's the way that we're looking at as projects come up. How do we put that within the portfolio to see, from a diversity or concentration risk perspective, how does this look? From a overall production kind of profile, does that meet the load profile needs of the utility as well? Because there does become balancing issues. And frankly, the fact that a lot of these resources are intermittent, how do we make sure that we're applying those potential opportunities in the most prudent way? And Matt, I don't know if you want to maybe talk at a high level about some of those efforts and how we're trying to put these pieces together in the most efficient way.
Right. And so there's a variety of options that we're actually fortunate to be able to consider. But the overarching view that we have is the major technology that's going to be transforming the New England grid is going to be offshore wind. So we are actively engaged in looking at bringing several opportunities into the portfolios over time, where we can essentially lever that technology, because we do think that that's going to be the biggest driver. And we've got kind of, again, for real general planning purposes, you'll see on that chart that there's a few offshore wind opportunities that we do expect will be coming along to enhance the portfolio. In addition to that, we also have opportunities to bring down hydro from Canada. We have an existing contract with Hydro-Quebec. We expect that contract is going to be extended. We are also talking to NYPA. NYPA did have an offer of giving us some additional hydropower. It turned out not to work out for a variety of reasons of trying to marry the ISO New England rules with the New York ISO market rules, and it just really didn't work for us to bring that additional power in. But there are opportunities that NYPA has made us aware of that we'll be talking to. In addition to that, there are onshore wind opportunities with Berkshire. There's potential expansion there, so we will be looking at that. And then in addition to that, we also have some opportunities with their existing assets at Seabrook to try to enhance the opportunity to take power from Seabrook that has the environmental attributes that will count against your GGES. So this slide really does represent kind of the overall strategy that we're looking at to bring in non-carbon emitting assets and renewable assets into the portfolios. And as you can see, when we have such benchmarks to get to like 75% by 2040 and net zero by 2050, you know, we are looking at, you know, some pretty large chunks of things that that we're going to have to take and bring into the portfolio. And fortunately, with the Inflation Reduction Act, there's been some opportunities that municipal systems can continue to own assets and take advantage to some additional advantages that we've not been able to take advantage of before until the Inflation Reduction Act came on board. So I could say, you know, for the commission that even though that these are kind of targets that are a long time away, the lead times to develop these things are also long. So you could expect to be hearing from us, you know, over the next few months about further updates as to how we progress on actually, you know, putting names of projects and economics of projects to fit into those multiple colors that you see on that chart.
Matt, I noticed that, yeah, and we've heard some stuff around fusion. Are we just not predicting that that will be anywhere viable before 2050?
Right now, we are definitely, you know, following that. We are in active discussions, but right now, we're a little hesitant to start mapping it out because there are a lot of, you know, it's an unproven technology that, you know, we got to watch. And then also there's kind of policy and legislative prohibitions right now about nuclear. So I think we got to let those things play out and mature a little bit more. But as you can tell from that chart, we still have a lot of space as we get beyond 2040, you know, heading towards that 2050 area that we still have to fill. So, you know, conceptually, we think that that's probably where some of those small modular nuclear opportunities may be very appropriate for the portfolio. But right now, it's a little too early for us to get in the position where we'd actually hold a slot for that technology.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, this is great. It's really these 3 slides are really helpful. So I really appreciate you putting them together. I mean, when I look at this, I see the first slide as being like not worth looking at because it's not going to happen. There's not going to be a without load growth scenario. So I'm kind of focusing on the latter too. And I guess what I wanted to ask you about is, you know, a lot of these opportunities are larger, further out, and not in our communities. Is there a place for in community, like to essentially ramp up or vastly expand that distributed energy resource piece in our own communities you know, between now and 2028, I guess, and what are you thinking about in terms of that chunk?
Yeah. So the ability to deploy technology that's going to be helpful to the overall portfolio and helpful to the ratepayer and helpful to the, you know, the overall cause, you're going to have ample opportunities, I think, Jen. Right now we're working on a group procurement for behind the meter batteries, which we think is going to create a lot of economic benefit to the overall portfolio and also contribute to that whole, you know, distributive generation asset growth. From a pure portfolio.
So Matt, I don't know how much you heard about our energy park discussion, but our share of that project would be the battery that would go to the energy park.
Excellent, excellent. So I think it will be in the context of what's really going to impact your local community. as far as, citing them in the local community, it's probably going to be those type of resources like that. And they're going to help you on containing and controlling transmission costs and capacity costs. And they'll also obviously contribute on how much power you actually have to pull in from MLEC because you'll have that opportunity to generate that power inside your distribution system. But I would say that's where you're going to see kind of the local impact. And then we got to overlay these larger projects that aren't going to be in Wakefield, but we need them because of their size and scale, because we need the power and then we need the scale to keep the economics, as favorable as possible. That's kind of how we see this playing out.
Yeah, I mean, the only real resources we can put in Wakefield are solar and batteries, and batteries are just the transmission and capacity play. And so the other piece is solar, and starting with, these two big roofs, these two new schools, that's.
But then you still have to have something that helps balance that as well.
Yeah.
That's not.
Well, that's why the batteries.
Are we looking at both MIC and us and how viable, like the virtual power plants where, the aggregating of the solar, the batteries, whether, they're in vehicles and homes, to kind of bridge a chunk of this? And I don't know how, economically viable that is.
Right now, that is this much work for this much benefit.
Well, the impact is,
That's what I'm afraid of,
Yeah, right. I mean, that's why we're much better focused on participating in a 7 megawatt solar farm in Ludlow than we are trying to connect Mrs. Smith's battery to our grid. So it's just the amount of impact it's going to have is so minuscule that the A and the B are not connected yet. And maybe over time that will take place, but in the short term.
it's a piece of it, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, it's small and.
These are what we're losing, you know what I mean? These, the plants, the generation is what we need. The other stuff fills a little bit, but that doesn't fill the gap.
Yeah.
I mean,
But to the credit of the light department, you're also not ignoring it through your Next Zero programs, like with Connected Homes, because Connected Homes is the technology that really is going to bring that virtual power plant that you were speaking of, where we're able to reach out and connect all these devices in customers' homes, and then they can be calibrated to actually contribute into demand management. But overall, the materiality and the impact of those versus the requirements that we have for the portfolio, like on this slide, it's a little disproportionate. But the light department is still paying attention to that opportunity.
And you mentioned behind the meter batteries. I mean, if they're standalone batteries, they would have to be charged somewhere from the grid, right? So wouldn't that power consumption be sort of flattened out throughout the day and the optimization of that? But there are days where you wouldn't be able to fully charge and get the benefit out of those batteries. So how is that going to be playing into this whole?
Well, it's all how it's how you want to kind of connect and configure the batteries. If the batteries are being fed by solar arrays, you are subject to the output of that solar array. But I guess at the end of the day, those kind of discrepancies are things that just have to be managed. And again, those types of projects in scale and scope to the overall portfolio, are going to be, smaller, so that if there is a given deficiency because it's cloudy one day and your battery is hooked up to a solar array, we're going to have other resources to cover that.
Yeah, I guess what I see kind of missing, the missing piece for me in all of this is kind of like what we are in fact doing, right, with the new high school and the VOC, which is like getting solar on the biggest roofs in our town and paired with batteries. And a lot of those roofs are not, there's some that schools are obviously a huge source of big roofs. Like that's an obvious candidate. But beyond that, in a lot of towns, you have commercial establishments, right? These are privately owned facilities. And so how do we actually crack the nut on large commercial, like business owners and that opportunity?
Yeah. Well, I think this is really where the focus on kind of the next zero programs really, merit continuing attention, because those are the programs that we're trying to design that kind of address a lot of those things, but they do it in a way that doesn't overburden, kind of the staff of the light department to try to execute. And then I think as it relates to those type of assets, actually, getting to a material level where you can kind of start seeing them on this type of a slide, it really is, kind of focusing on trying to grow those type of projects.
Matt, to Jen's comment, how much is MWEC, and to your comment around not taxing the staff of the light departments, a lot of these, commercial buildings, especially when either being renovated or built, it's the legislation and the building codes that are impactful in driving that. How much, is MWEC working with the state and kind of crafting these, building codes, stretch codes to help get those assets on as a requirement of building that, we all then can take advantage of, so that we're not necessarily doing it after the fact, which is a lot more burdensome to the utilities.
Well, there's kind of two avenues that we're addressing that. One is kind of on the policy advocacy side, and that's, a lot of what we do in the executive branch with DOER as an example, or the Mass Clean Technology Center. And then again, through the Next Zero programs, especially on the commercial side, there's a whole, we do have a variety of commercial programs for commercial audits and things of that nature, where we can deploy the resources under that program, which effectively are vendors that, we hire, and they get aggregated so they can go out to all the members who are subscribing to that service and, perform those type of commercial audits. And then there are, at the discretion of the light departments, the potential for, rebate programs and things like that. So that's kind of the execution side of it. And that's the thing that we kind of focus on, is to try to provide our members with opportunities for execution and do it in a way that's very efficient from a resource management perspective. So we're, that's what I'm saying, we're not overburdening the staff of the light department to try to do that.
Yeah, I wonder what it would look like if we, I'm just curious, like what it would look like if the towns did like all their big roofs, like would we see it? Like what would that actually look like on this graph? Yeah, like what would that piece look like? How big would it be?
Well, one of the things we could look at, Marblehead engaged in an effort with NREL to look at and do an assessment of their town as far as where there were opportunities for, rooftop solar and how big that they would be. We could maybe share that just as a kind of a directional data point for you, and then you could maybe make some certain assumptions as to what how Wakefield looks like compared to like Marblehead, to just try to get an order of magnitude assessment. You hate to jump to conclusions, Jen, but as you can see on this graph, we got to find an awful lot of non-carbon emitting power for the portfolio to meet those target requirements.
Yep, we do. But also to that point, every piece counts.
Yep.
And it helps us control our costs too. So
exactly. And I think the message I hope we can convey is that we're going to need everything. There's not one silver bullet here, and we're not poo-pooing, any technologies or thoughts of it, because we're going to need it all. There's a big task at hand with this requirement.
Yeah,
And then-
solar is stuff we can do between now and 2030
Right.
because the
But-
buildings are already here in many cases.
Yeah, but the other side of the solar thing is you have no control over it. So in terms of it being part of your resource mix, I mean, so it has a piece to the pie, but it doesn't offset this.
No, yeah.
Because we have the obligation to serve, so, if, 1, 2, 3 company down the street puts solar on their roof and they get some benefit from that, and we buy back a little bit. It's still, we have zero control over that resource versus a resource matrix that we can manage, So that's the other side. Every little piece count, and we've been talking about this since 2015, which is that we need all of this. It all needs to work together. There is no one answer. It's gonna be a whole bunch of answers. The next Mystic 750 megawatt unit is not coming. We're not building another one of those. So all the answers are all these little tiny slices that are gonna add together.
Yeah, I guess I'm just not comfortable with the idea of waiting to 2028 to do something, that's all. And then waiting, when we have technologies that, and things that we can do today.
I mean, we're not waiting though. I mean, the energy park was part of it,
Right.
so that was a big
And
piece of
that's
it. And
probably
that's,
not here, actually.
but that whole
Right?
concept about managing the different assets and generation and how they work together is what the energy park is all about. To look at battery energy storage, the natural gas generator.
Getting energy,
Energy,
solar on
yep,
this.
the solar on the roof, right? So all those assets all work together, but they don't replace the grid, and they don't replace the units that are required that run all the time and we can rely on. The solar has its place, even the battery has its limitations.
Yeah.
So I mean, but they all work together. But I mean, the scary part is what this looks like and what solar can really provide and what the future looks like, without having that mix.
I mean, the other thing right now, we're not sued. It would be a colossal waste of money to put anything that has association with wind in Wakefield.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So our only options are solar and battery.
Yeah,
So
I agree with that.
I mean, we have that project.
battery has limitations.
We are looking at other roofs too, I mean, for other buildings for so.
I think we're gonna keep this moving because we got a lot more on the agenda. Thank you, guys. I don't know if you guys have any questions about the last 2 slides, but it's kind of self-explanatory.
Actually, one question on page 50, this one. The getting to 56, what is in there, I guess? What's bringing us from 52 to 56 specifically on this slide?
Some of those things include the solar RECs that we can procure or sell as we generate more, more opportunities. So those are the, procure or retire. Yeah.
Okay.
So our goal is to try to keep growing like at 1% a year. Any other questions for Matt and Justin?
No, I think this is really helpful.
Thanks, guys.
Great. Good to see everybody again.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Welcome
Good
to
to meet you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. I see Phil.
Goes back.
Electric vehicle proposed rate.
So Jack was not here. He had questions. He did come in after our last meeting. I think he sent out an email to Jen and I today, and I think he's comfortable with moving forward with it. I think we do need to come up with the terms, especially there was a question about how you could get off it. So we'll have to craft that. But I think, and the other thing is we'll have to have a public hearing, but I think we'll just have to look at what the requirements would be to switch off the rate. And some of the variables are, if you're gonna come off the rate, then are you gonna keep the meter active? Or are you gonna disconnect the meter and, because you're not, then you will or won't pay a customer service charge, because if the meter exists, you're paying a customer service charge for it. So the question.
In addition to the already customer, so like what, it's $6 for a customer. So if someone has the EV meter, they're essentially 12, are we doubling that? So it's a,
Well, if they have, I think we would plan to,
Separate meter is a separate meter. It's a
Right.
bill, it's a separate, right.
Count.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if we look at that, then if they're gonna get off it, are they gonna blank the meter location now and take the meter out, or is there still gonna be an active meter that they're just gonna rewire their charger to their house meter again? You know, so that, those are some of the variables you're gonna, when you say you want to get off the program, how are you gonna do that? You know, so that's one of the things.
big infrastructure change. I mean, I know that there is a scenarios where that could happen, but I don't see a lot of folks.
I agree, but it was a question Jack had.
No, I mean, it's a totally valid question. And it's probably more policy,
Mhm.
but I don't, for someone that has spent the money, put that in outside of, I guess maybe someone moves, right?
Well, one of the scenario he cited was I work the day shift and I can charge at night.
My charging habits change,
And now all of a sudden I got
paying more.
shifted to the night shift, so I need to charge, so.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
So
And that's
that-
some of the challenges that I have with the, especially with having the separate meters. And, putting solar in and that, they're segmented in that aspect. Because you're not gonna be able to take benefit of, solar, which, almost any solar customer, I would say, is not gonna go on the EV time of use rate. So.
Yes, each premises is gonna end up with like 6 meters eventually once we're all said and done.
I agree with that, but
Well, because you're not gonna be able to put your solar into your car.
I agree, but I think the amount of solar people have is oftentimes not as much as their entire house anyways, so it's not necessarily always a material.
So then if you get 5% power off peak for just charging your vehicle, then.
Yeah, I mean, it could be it's a good question in terms of how to, someone wants to come off.
So that was one of the questions. I think we'll have to look at that in terms of the logistics of that.
I mean, from a utility perspective, I would say it's not on us in terms of, rewiring if someone wants to come off.
So where,
From the service, like it's a disconnect, right? In that.
Well, we had talked about giving a small incentive, so is the incentive lost or is it? So we gotta look at the ramifications of the incentive. I can't imagine you come off right away anyway.
Yeah.
So if we're gonna incent you to help you put your meter socket in, and then 6 months from now, you decide to go off the rate. How are you coming off the rate? Are you blanking the meter and running your thing back to your house meter? If you're keeping the meter, what impact does that have? You changing the rate on that second meter to a normal rate, and if that happens, we have 2 services to the house now. So there's some ramifications to that we have to
Are we
figure out.
dropping a second?
Not a second service.
No.
We have 2 meters on a single residence.
Okay, so.
Not as
just like
opposed to a
a
multifamily.
multifamily box,
Right.
aerial comes down or.
Yeah, it's a single service, but there's still the operational ramifications. We just gotta make sure can we change that meter that was, we'll have a second meter that is on a residential 1 rate. Or, so we just gotta kind of kick that around a little bit.
I mean, most likely it'll happen when they move. Like say if someone was in the rate, they had a car and then they moved. After 3 or 4 years, they decided to move it. Then when a new homeowner, no electric vehicle, they wouldn't want to pay for the second meter.
I mean, I think simply in my mind, if we are doing an incentive, prorating that incentive over whatever number of years, say you have to be on for 3 years, but if you do move, not locking them in after, cut it at a third.
That's currently what we do with the chargers.
Yeah.
So if you were to leave, we give you the charger for free. It's a $600 value. If you live after 1 year, if you want to, we had one customer was questioning whether they wanted to jump off the program. I'm like, all right, well, you're only halfway through it, so we'll have to charge you $300 because we gave you a $600 charger.
Yeah.
And you've only been doing it for a year and a half, so you're gonna get a $300 charge. And, there are other issues, but in essence, that's what we do with the chargers right now.
I mean, I think that is the cleanest way from a incentive to recoup that is, if we're gonna require the minimum of 3 years, prorate that for that.
It might be better if I think Dave, Mark and I need to, I didn't think about that part of it, so we probably want to work some iterations just to make sure we cover everything before we craft the terms and conditions.
And then-
right?
Just backing up to the customer chart, so if someone, and just if we could walk me through. If someone signs up for that, they're going to, on their bill, they're gonna have 2 meter chart, like they're gonna have 2 $6 customer charges.
2 separate bills, right?
We could try, well, I don't know if we're gonna be able to put both bills on, both meters on the same bill. I don't know about that. I don't know.
So
about
not
that.
like solar, because you have.
We'll have to look at that. We'll have to,
That
Look at
doesn't have
the
it.
real estate on the bills.
yeah, and Cogsdale issues too, to see if we can combine it, so.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like we now add a $6 monthly charge.
Yeah,
That kind of eats into the
savings.
savings and, I don't know how many folks are gonna I like having the option, but if we price it out, then no one's gonna take it, right? If it becomes, the savings is whittled away even more with, a $6 monthly charge as well, that potentially.
All right, well, we've been evaluating this, and I think the answer is we'll do a little more legwork on this before we. Yeah, I think that these are some valid issues that we probably want to scenario out.
And I don't know if you can mock up. Like a bill. With, a average charging scenario, what that would look like, and then have. What that would look like on, if they did it without.
The last time we did a mock-up, it didn't go well. We spent a lot of time talking about the markup.
No, I meant like just a bill, like it's a separate bill of.
Well, I think what we need to do is, these are valid policy issues, but I think we should craft a rate sheet and try to address these policy issues,
Okay. I was just thinking more of like a Cogsdale bill that showed, here's 500, hours off peak, and maybe they had to charge that 5%. So there is, maybe 50 kWh that's on peak, and see what that bill would, and put any, if there is a customer charge, put that in and just kind of see that. And then, we can do the math very quickly on a regular bill, because that's just a fixed kWh.
Is this different from what I produced last meeting? I'm just
Not,
trying to
no,
wrap my
not
head.
really, just putting it in the bill format.
Oh, okay.
So it's really using the numbers that we've already put together.
Yeah.
But just, as in a bill. Because now we have the potential customer charge as well that adds into that.
Okay.
But yeah, I hadn't even thought about the disconnect, like
Yeah, those are two valid things. So let us work on that a little bit.
how much with the disconnect, just wonder from just an engineering technical perspective. So say the scenario, someone puts this in, they've got the 2 meter box installed. And only from our perspective, person moves, someone new comes in and says, I don't want this. What do we need to do as a utility other, or are we pulling the meter,
Pull the meter, put a blank in there and.
okay.
Yeah.
Call it a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my point about if they're getting off of it, what are they leaving everything in place, then you're still reading the meter every month. And then you're gonna have to charge you the customer service charge versus I'm gonna rewire my charger back to my old meter. And I'm going to blank the other one, then Mark's group's not reading.
I don't know that the scenario that someone is going to rewire that, but I mean, I guess they could, but I'm just. Where's our responsibility and what do we need to to do, right, when in that scenario.
Well, the
Just
other-
trying to think about the end, that's.
I mean,
Yeah, from our side, we
we
just,
do it all over town.
yeah,
We have a meter socket without a meter in it because either someone doesn't live there anymore, pull the meter, put a blank in it, put a seal on
so
it.
the bigger question we'll have is, could we convert that second meter to an R1 rate without an impact? You know, that's,
Fine, that's finaling out the meter, right? It's finaling out the meter, getting a final read, and then just starting the next day or the next. Yeah, on a different rate.
and then they wouldn't have to rewire it back to their old house meter, but we got a scenario like.
But how-
But if they don't
impact-
rewire, if they don't rewire, then we're running into issues.
We just put a meter in it for a regular, set it for a regular rate.
What, and what, I mean, I guess.
Why would we
what
do that,
is-
though? We wouldn't want, yeah,
Why'd we serve
You-
half the
right,
house?
you-
yeah,
Yeah, you're still back to the same
yeah,
scenario of having 2 meters in there.
yeah, right, yeah.
We would have to rely on the customer to take the charger off of the.
Yeah,
Yeah, and how does that,
You-
from a code perspective, I'm just thinking.
Well, yeah, well, they would either get, if they called us and said, I don't want to be on this time of use rate anymore. And, but if there was a way that we said, okay, we're just gonna take the new meter that we installed for the time of use rate and just change the rate on it back to the R1 rate.
But you're still dealing with a $6 a month charge, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Right, yes,
so now one premises has 2 meters.
right, that was my point.
Build.
Yeah, we have to scenario all that stuff out, because,
So what we do,
get like a production. No,
well,
Yeah.
rather than give answers tonight,
I know, it's.
let us take some time to think about it.
It's,
kind of similar to having, I mean, a house with a garage with a separate service, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
Some properties that have, a garage
Yeah.
just wired separately. That separate meter in the garage that feeds the garage, that has, you're paying $6 a month for that as
Yeah.
well, right? Whether it's one on the house, one on the.
yeah, let's look at all this.
Yeah.
Give us some time, right? I think these are good questions, and I think we should think about them before we come back with an answer.
cool,
Okay,
thank you.
that makes sense. Thank you. New business, the 2023 capital and expense budget.
Mark, you want to start with the operating budget?
The separate sheets are also in the book, right?
Yes, the bigger versions.
We say it's small. It's so small, I can.
Yeah.
You want
No,
a,
I have,
But we included in everybody's book the larger versions.
I have cheat sheets too. Small.
So these are the operating budgets for the gas and electric.
It's not there, it's not there? It's not in the operating, yeah. So on the electric side. What we do when we go through the budget is, first of all, we plug in the actuals for the prior year. So that we did, Jack did the audit or whatever, and we kind of have that. So, and then we, move forward from there. And when we move forward from there, the two biggest drivers of the budget, for us, especially this year, I mean, we just, heard, Matt-eyed and, and Justin's, presentation. So we took that, and we added, roughly 25%, which added about in the range of $3 million to the cost of power, year over year. And then what we do from there is, on the expense side, and then we go up top side on the revenue and we say, look, we've got to add at least $3 million in the various buckets from, we break it down, residential, commercial, and municipal. We spread the $3 million across those rate categories. And that's how we, kind of the basic building blocks of the budget from there, because those are the two biggest line items. The other thing on here, that I had, kind of put, so I put those in, in the red, some little red circles on here. The other thing that I had on a red circle down the bottom is the pension benefit and OPEB. And that's primarily that, I don't have hard numbers on that yet, and I won't until, and that number isn't anything that, the actuary and market returns actually control that number. It isn't anything that, we could, the department could actually wiggle out from under. So that's the basics on how we build the budget for the The 23 budget is in the, that gold colored, so the green columns are the, actual and budget for 2022, which is already passed. Going forward into the future, what we're looking at for 2023 is the gold column. That's that budget. And then the other thing that we've done is we project out 2 years in the future from that. So we were 24, 25. And those are incremental increases. We just apply a straight factor of either 2% or 3%, across on those numbers for 24 and 25, because we're really not, they're not really in focus yet. A lot of those are just placeholder numbers. So but we put it for reference purposes. So the bottom line on 2023 is we're projecting a ballpark of a $600,000 surplus. And we kind of carry that across for 24 and 25 as well for the bottom line. The other thing you'll kind of notice under the power cost, about a third of the way down, kind of coming into play in the out year in 2025, we put in the energy park. So that's scheduled, Dave, to be online. Is 2025 the year?
Yep.
2025 is the year that the tech is planning. They're planning an opening. So that's what we kind of plugged it in. So that's right now that's the debt. I say it in brackets. I have debt service, but it's really going to be a combination of debt service and the financing opportunities that we may or may not come to light. Leasing opportunities and things like that. So that's just kind of how I tagged it there is it may or may not end up being a physical debt payment. So but it'll be the payment on the energy park. So that's part of the ingredients in this budget as well in the out years. And again, the energy park numbers are going to come into focus as we actually start making deposits on those numbers will be clearer. So that won't be where the final stands, but that's the guesstimate as we're at right now.
How come we had such a much, and not complaining, but on the MI refunds, so much larger than what was projected, and at least in the past couple of years, or
so
last year?
Yeah. So 2019, we had 1.3 million. Remember what that was, Pete?
That was the retirement of the debt?
No. Oh, yeah, the Seabrook debt.
Yeah.
It was the Seabrook. That was Pete Seabrook money.
That was my Seabrook money that he made disappear faster than I could spend it.
And then some of the Seabrook money actually trickled into 2020 as well. In 2022, that 375,000, that was the final payment on Wyman. The final payment, there was Carol had said that there was a holdback on that for whatever reason. So we divested of an oil generating unit, Wyman it was up in Maine, I believe, a few years back. And there was a holdback on that. I guess that was a legal type issue, and that ended up flowing through and in that year in 2022. So that's what that was. But yeah, they're big bumps with like large events like the retirement or debt service and things like that. So we don't plan for those. We don't see any more retirements of anything like that on the horizon. So if we did, we'd budget for them. But yeah.
The next big thing will hopefully be retiring the debt for the generators at Wallace.
Yep.
Next few years.
And that's kind of planned, and that kind of the way that's kind of working. I won't use the word shell game, but really it's kind of it's falling. The debt for the Wallace generators. Okay, it's kind of falling off. It's maturing, and it's going to be paid for at the same time that the energy park is going to come. One is going to,
and they're not one for one, but that'll help.
That'll
right.
offset
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Roll one off, put one on.
Right.
So are the projections for energy costs that we just received this evening in this?
Correct. 20 to, right. So we actually had a discussion. Yeah, it was like 20 to 25%. But the way that it's going to, and again, remember, you kind of saw the graphs, it's going to be it's gonna be 40% one month and 40% the next month, and then it's gonna be like 10% and 5%. It's not gonna, you know what I mean? So there's some challenges there for me anyway, some challenges there to kind of, budget that, within.
But I see 19.2 million in here, which aligns with what we just heard
Yeah.
from Memwick, so.
You want to talk about the conservation charge?
So the conservation charge, we're budgeting, if we look at it, I had it circled on the other
Sorry,
one.
where is it?
Yep,
Oh, there it is.
it's up top side. Okay, I'm budgeted 564. So the results that we had budgeted, let's just back up a little bit. We had come in at a little bit, we had budgeted revenue.
0.5% this year.
We used 0.5% and we came in so the conservation charge is budgeted for revenue at 564,300. It's budgeted on the,
That's based on the 0.5%.
that's based on 0.5%.
Sorry, 564,300. Where is
In the
it?
golds,
Oh,
in the FY 20.
Right.
oh, thank you.
But if you look, and if you go down the bottom on the conservation expense, okay, what we paid out this year.
Actually, let's take a step back.
Okay.
Last year at the 0.5%, we budgeted the 0.5%, it related to in that same row for 2022, the 0.5% translated to 484,000. You see that? It's just to the left of the goal.
Yep.
So that's what the 0.5% generated. But then, so now go, Mark.
Okay, so now if you go all the way down the bottom under the admin and general expenses, like
512.
75% down the way to the bottom. So we actually paid out this year in FY 22, we actually paid out 512. Right?
Okay.
So we paid out, a little bit more, a lot of it more. So we budgeted this year, actually, Pete, I think that's the 0.7, the 564 is the 0.07.
Right.
Right.
So the recommendation is we go from 0.05 to 0.07 because we already spent basically 0.06 this year. The 512 basically relates to 0.06.
Yeah.
So plus or minus. So based on the success of the program and the growth of the program, we're recommending that this year it be
Yeah.
0.07. And there's an analysis.
Yeah, there's a sheet with all the
Yeah.
calculations in there. 57 book.
There.
57 of the book.
That's
That's the one here.
No, I'm just saying, it says 56. Yeah, it's but it's still 57.
So that
564, that's this page up here in the upper. Okay. We want to go into the 0.09 piece, Pete?
We need to,
Yeah.
it's the 0.07. How does that work from a budget, us voting?
So we would vote for the change in the conservation charge as part of the budget.
Right.
Okay,
Yep.
all right,
Yep.
so we kind of have to have this discussion first.
It's part,
So-
that's-
Part and parcel.
one deals with the other, yeah.
And then there was a scenario on this page 57 or in the book or 56 online. The letter that was read last month, so we did we did a sensitivity analysis. If we were to pay out at those rates, we would have to go to 0.09. So based on
Based on the letter said 1,000, that basically it was $1,000 a ton, right, with was it 5,000 cap or a
6,000.
6,000 cap?
I had a question on the cap. We have an annual cap of
2,500.
Does this, move more like solar and is independent of that cap? Because obviously.
Solar's
The
in,
heat, correct, the heat pump would be similar to the solar and it's like,
Yes.
it has its own separate.
So someone could
Yeah.
do, if we went with this scenario, could do the heat pump, get there up to $6,000 and then still do 2,500 and other.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this is per year, right? So, or is it restricted? Can a customer do this?
Was pretty.
It's for you.
Per year.
Yeah, so they could do a project this year and then do another project next year if we were to move this to 6,000.
Yeah.
That's how we contemplate, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate that.
So that's,
A lot of work, yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
just wondering.
6 ton of a
Yeah.
HVAC system.
Really, yeah.
so,
Did yours?
No, I'm saying.
but our recommendation is to go to the
Oh,
the
yeah.
point oh seven.
Go to the seven, point, so, yeah, so it'll be just over half a penny.
So we don't have a scenario that goes to the 1,000, but doesn't lift the rebate cap, for example. This is like we don't have like a piecemeal. I'm just curious.
I would potentially propose, like, if we kept it at the 0.7, that regardless of moving, that the heat pump not be included in the cap, like we don't include the solar. My rationale is, if you're doing a heat pump, the first part, you really do need to be the insulation and the air sealing first, and we kind of penalize, you could chew up that 2,500.
Well, the biggest piece of the rebates aside from solar is the heat pumps now. So the 0.07 without a cap might not be enough money.
Correct. I'm a proponent of the moving the cap to 6,000 and the 1,000 under the 0.09. But if for some reason that we don't go that route, my suggestion would be that the heat pump not count towards the.
But that wouldn't be revenue neutral.
Yeah.
Right, so you can't say we're only gonna stay at 0.07, but we're gonna eliminate the cap. It wouldn't play out that way. So.
Okay. Yeah, and how,
You wouldn't be able to stay at 0.07. You'd have to go to some other number. So.
oh, I wasn't suggesting it was being
Yeah.
revenue neutral. I was just saying that in terms of someone who's doing a project, they're gonna get 2,500, and most of the time that project is both insulation plus heat pump, and it dilutes it even more in that aspect.
But under that scenario, though, that person could get up to $8,500, right? If we go, right?
Correct.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
We're generous.
It's Pete's money, I'm generous.
Priorities.
Think about it, it's very close to what Mass Save is offering, right? Like $1,250 per ton on
Yeah.
pumps. Now I have to look, but I don't know what the charges are on the IOUs for conservation, which is.
2.5%.
There you go.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
looked.
Pretty close, pretty close.
We're basically at almost 0.75% right now. I mean, we're at 0.5% right now, recommending we go to 0.7, which is almost 3/4.
And we're probably at that 0.07, we're probably delivering at 80 or 90% of the Mass Save offering level. At a third of the
Cost.
cost of the customer, so.
Is it still the same process would apply where you go to?
Yeah,
a vote and get all
yeah.
the
Okay, we're not proposing a change.
changes.
So,
I like that, I mean.
Yeah, the abode has been excellent to work with.
Yeah.
If we ever have a question about anything, they're on the phone in 2 seconds with us. They handle a lot of the pre-screening of the customers and they help do a better job. So
No, I wouldn't.
it's well worth the investment.
It almost should be required because.
It is required.
It is required.
Okay, good.
The first year we were in transition.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first year we were in transition, so we let a few of them go, but now they won't get the rebate without
Okay,
talking about.
no, that's good because I think customer
Then John says
satisfaction.
no.
Yeah,
Customer satisfaction depends a lot upon that kind of technical,
Yeah, they can't, the only way we pay out a rebate is with an email from above that said they've gone through them.
This is a tough one. Because we have rates.
Yeah, the
This
rates,
is actually really tough. It's tough timing. We have rate increases. One thing that feels important to me, and I don't think it's going to move the needle a lot, is to revisit the conversation of removing incentives for central air conditioners and natural gas equipment.
like natural gas boilers, you mean?
Equipment, yep. Now, I don't think that there's that much of it, that it's gonna free up that much cash for other stuff. But it just feels important to me to continue to not only add to the program, but also refine, remove measures that should be phased out.
Joe, do you have those numbers?
So I just want to do our due diligence there and making sure that the measures we're actually incenting are worth providing.
And we don't have a lot of people that apply for it. It's $100.
For the AC.
Yeah.
Joe might have the numbers for us.
I don't think they're huge.
Yeah, I mean, they should be on this page, it should be page 18. It should show the breakdown of the last couple of years as well as through September of this year. It shows the breakdown of the dollars that are associated with, as well as the rebates captured.
Yeah,
It should be under heating systems. It's like the 5th one down, I think.
well, Central Air was only,
Yeah, I don't think Central Air was big. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
heating systems, we paid out $1,500 this year. And what was the other one?
Central Air and.
Yeah.
heating, yeah.
So there's $1,700.
Well, that's through. Right, so far this year.
3/4 of the year.
Yeah.
So it's,
Last year it was like 17,000 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
but you remember a lot of those heating system dollars have switched over to, we've been working hard to push those over to the heat pump side.
I know.
What the heating system, 10,000. Or it's actually FY 22, it's 15,005. That's. Are we lumping in, that's the gas heating system?
Yes, we eliminated any oil.
Would anybody changing their existing furnace to like a more high efficiency?
That's when they get.
The rebate, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
And then water heaters, are those, that's a mix of, right, fossil fuel and heat pump water heaters? No, it's a
I know, I think it's a gas once.
It's only gas, yeah.
Water heater.
gas.
Yeah.
So the, like a heat pump water heater would be under mini split heat pumps?
no, well, that's a separate appliance.
Yeah.
Right.
It's appliance rebate of 500.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. All right.
Did we have it? I don't see that in. So when we're saying water heater, that's the gas water heater, not the heat pump one.
Yeah, I think that should be the gas one. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look at the data, but I'm not sure how many, if any, takers we have on the heat pump.
Yeah, I just for labeling, we should probably just label that gas water heater.
We have no,
Okay.
yeah, we have a few, the water heater, the heat pumps.
Yeah.
We do have it.
And did we, and I know,
Not that many, right?
I'll bring it up. I had asked about, the solar assist.
Usually, she wants to make sure that
Yeah, Joe looked into that. So right now, they are only available in Europe, so they don't even have an efficiency rating in America. They're European manufacturers.
Yeah.
So they have European ratings, so so we'd be on in a type, we'd be on kind of the bleeding edge of that, and we wouldn't even have a metric that compared to like an Energy Star rating for it, so. Right, Joe?
Which one?
Yeah, I think that's kind of.
The solar assist heat pump water heaters, which solar assist is kind of not entirely accurate because it doesn't need direct. So it's more of a transfer of the heat out.
Yep.
I was just wondering if adding that in under the, if it would qualify under our current heat pump water heater for the $500 incentive.
So again, the budget is based on energy conservation charge of 0.07 with us maintaining similar programs. Phil, are you still on?
What's that?
Is Phil
Yeah.
still on? Oh, okay.
If we go with the 0.7 for the heat pumps, we'll go back to the 500 or?
We would stay at the, I would stay the same. Okay.
That's the 0.7, yeah.
I don't know, I feel this is really tough. I mean, all these things are important.
The timing is tough though.
The timing's tough. I totally agree with that. So priorities. I feel like the rebate cap for me is actually the bigger priority over the increase in the per ton rebate. The economics compared to natural gas these days are actually looking pretty good for a heat pump. Not sure we need to push the needle more than we have. But it is a problematic in my mind that a customer that wants to do a big comprehensive job like all at once is like artificially phasing stuff out just to align with different calendar years, which I myself did. So I can tell you it's a real thing. It really happens and it's a massive pain and we shouldn't have to wait for energy savings because of some kind of calendar year constraint. So I think that that's kind of, if I had to kind of pick and choose, that would be my higher priority right now, because I think it really does kind of mess with, you know, just logistics of projects that are already logistically challenging in the first place in a pretty big way. And I want to see people do the weatherization part. And most people come in as a heat pump and then they say, oh yeah, my house is poorly weatherized. And it's kind of like the second piece they think about. And I want to make sure that piece happens and doesn't fall off the priority list or get bumped because some other project comes and takes its place. Like I really want that savings piece to happen. So if I have to prioritize, that would be my priority. And I would want it to happen sooner rather than later. And I would want to remove the incentives for central air and heating systems, gas heating systems, which might not fully offset that, but would maybe.
Yeah, it would only help. I think if you eliminated a cap, the impact would be much greater than the amount of money you're proposing taking off. You're only talking about 4 jobs potentially between those two categories. That if you eliminated a cap that went up to people spending $6,000, you're looking at 3 jobs probably.
Well, let's talk about the cap itself then. You know, do we have to go as high as 6K?
So your scenario is kind of keeping the per heat pump, keeping the per ton at 500
Correct.
with a, you know, some cap on the heat pump that is outside of the other cap, the 2,500 cap. So you could have, there's an exclusive cap on the heat pump and then the 2,500.
Well, I think our point of the cap is more about the weatherization. It's
Like you'd have the cap of the 2,500 under the weatherization because that still applies. So we'd be pulling the heat pump out from that.
You'd have to pull out heat pump and insulation. Those two categories.
You would want to pull out insulation as well, like give it a different cap than the 2,500.
I just want to restructure so the two could be done together in the same calendar year with some reasonable cap. It doesn't have to be like as high as 6K, but it's not so completely limiting and yeah. Those would be my priorities and.
I think that will have a bigger impact than going to the 1,000 per ton and capping it at 6,000.
It will, yeah. I mean, again, the question, just eliminating the 2 categories that Jen's talking about, though, won't cover it. I mean, you're gonna have to go up.
Right.
We didn't do a specific analysis on what we thought the cap would be. A change of the cap would be, but it's gonna be significant, you know.
And given that we're already going up, what, 22% on the power charges?
So the 2 cent I'm sorry, going from 0.05 to 0.07. It's gonna be $1.50. On a 750 kWh
Average, yeah.
average, it's $1, or $18 a year. And if we move, it's $36 a year if you go to
Double.
0.09, yeah.
But then once you factor higher energy rates.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're looking at for the winter, the average customer is gonna be at least, the average on the electric side is gonna be like another $30 a month and at a minimum, and that $30 over the course of the 4 months of the winter, they're already, so now they're gonna be 18 more plus 120 more for the, you know. So.
If. As maybe a compromise, would, if, you know, move into the 0.07. Having and moving the heat pump to say like a 2,500 like cap on its own, so you could potentially do between insulation, air sealing, and a heat pump, you could get up to 5,000 if you were to fully exhaust to the cap. So that is more impactful and beneficial and in doing the whole project from, you know, weatherization to heat pump. Would we be able to fit that?
935,000, just based on 22 numbers, right? 187 ton at $5,000 piece.
Well, that's assuming that everybody has that scalable weatherization
Right.
project.
Right. But I mean, worst case scenario.
Right. So that's like a worst case scenarios. Correct.
I'm assuming most people hit the cap around the 2,500.
Yeah. They did projects like that.
Yeah, they did projects.
So Joe, I'm looking at raw numbers. How many installation projects, is there a quantity, a number, is it show somewhere, or
It's 60?
how many installation projects do we do?
Yeah, so last year was 60. That includes insulation and windows. A lot of times people do them, if they're doing windows, they do them
So
together.
if we raise the cap 60 times 2,500, that's,
150 grand.
so that therefore it's, I mean.
Well,
that-
would they have hit the cap or? I'm not raising the cap on the insulate, it would just be on the heat pump side. So I guess they could take,
They're gonna just move it around, they're gonna spend it.
yeah. Or I guess we're making this, how many, let's see.
We raise the cap.
60 here.
If we raise the cap, the people that do projects like this will go from 2,500 to $5,000. And that's gonna be 160. So what is that? Instead of adding. Yeah, so we would have to add 160 more to the,
584.
Yeah, I mean,
That's total projects?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you look at, there were 77 heat pump projects. Are we making an assumption that the 60 insulation were the same?
yeah, I mean, that would get us up to the 692, basically.
Yeah. That's 7.25.
Yeah. Huh?
That's 7.25 would be, was that math? 564 plus 160. Gets you to 725,000, which is a little bit north of the $692,000.
So how's that
That would
math?
actually come out to closer to a cent.
So the average job is like 2.4 on per job on the heat pump.
Yeah,
If we looked at 60 installation jobs, that's 150 plus. What have we spent on heat pumps? 100K, 92.
92 last year.
Yeah.
So raising that cap would actually end up probably having to come in close to a cent.
So how does raising the cap to 2,500 different than the 9 cents that we have that's proposed here with the
Because we weren't,
$5 per-
I don't think we were eliminating the cap on this. We were just increasing the tonnage.
Oh, this does not have the cap in it because it says,
So we have
It was a
increase our rebate cap to 6,000.
It was increase the cap and increase the to 1,000 a ton.
right,
Yeah,
so
so,
presumably doing one of the two things would be.
Yeah,
lower than this.
yeah, so that's why the math's not making sense in.
Yeah, I think it was more focused on the $1,000 a ton for the existing. I don't think it looked really at the cap. Because the cap's gonna be the driver. We were looking at the pump as the driver, it's the cap that's the driver. So,
Okay, can we get confirmation of that? Because that feels pretty important. Is it in here or is it not in here?
I think we,
So I would say that it's, yeah, so I would say that it's not in there. The 6,000, I guess. That piece has to do with the heat pumps. It's a 25% increase on the heat pump side, but it kept the general 10% increase on the other programs from the other scenario. So it probably, from the discussion that we're having now, it would probably increase even more than is stated here, would be what I would say.
Although, yeah, because I guess most folks wouldn't, I mean, that's a 6 ton. If we're doing per ton, that's a 6 ton, that's a big system. Yeah, like you said, it's, even go on the high side, right? Call it three,
Four max. Yeah.
call it 3 tons. Average, so it's 3,000 in a rebate. If we're talking 1,000, per ton.
how about I propose this? Why don't we have to come up with a smaller cap than, I mean, to fund a $5,000 cap, we're gonna end up having to go to a cent. If we came up with some middle stat and then we went to like 0.8 or something, somewhere in between, and then we agree to evaluate it 6 months through the year, because we can always adjust it. Either we have two options: we can feather the throttle and slow it down, or increase the amount at that time. But we're at risk of, we were over this year by 30 grand, and because our programs are pretty successful. But this lifting of this cap is a huge risk.
Yeah, and I, it's tough because, the timing is awful. But I do think there is a challenge out there with folks, that are making energy efficiency improvements, and, putting a heat pump in.
Yeah.
Kind of necessitates for a lot of folks, they have to do the air sealing.
But the balance of that is we're gonna have Mrs. Smith, who's not gonna want to do that project, and she's now paying a cent more.
Yeah, no, it's like,
The option is to just make the measure changes and then table these discussions for after the winter and see where we are with
Yeah.
this.
We have the opportunity to add things in the one. So keep the programs as is with the 0.7
And then reevaluating like.
after the winter's like, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Get better.
there's no reason we can't adjust it for a July 1 start.
With the lawn equipment, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Which would be fine too, but I mean,
We can look into like different types of tiering of the program too.
Yeah.
If somebody's eliminating gas or oil completely rather
Yeah.
than having a heat pump.
Yeah.
Keeping a
Like we need-
secondary source of heat,
yeah.
maybe we go to the top,
That
but
could be-
for somebody that is adding a pump to an existing.
yeah, that's good. Yes. Do
Yeah,
we want
like we need
to,
more time on this one.
as part of Jen, your part around elimination of stuff, or just keep as?
I would suggest we hold the programs, let's reevaluate them after the winter.
A lot of.
I don't know. I really want to eliminate. I would be leaning towards eliminating this.
We'll say this, though, not too many people are replacing a boiler in the middle of the winter.
Right, yeah,
More of a-
yeah.
They don't, you know what I mean?
It is an emergency.
Yeah.
Which means they're free rider in the program because they would have done it anyways.
Wow. There's a lot of free riders in the program too.
And then just circling my understanding.
We got 60 this year with the rebates that we had, so there are people that would do it regardless.
Yeah. On the solar assist heat pump, we wouldn't include it because it has the European.
Right now, there's no comparable, we do everything with Energy Star, and right now it's just got a European rate. I'm assuming it's gonna be coming soon, but as of right now, it's.
I know the European ratings are basically, they're all rated at the top tier, which would be, I just don't know. how
We don't have a good point of
Yeah.
comparison, yeah,
So,
yeah.
They're gonna get a separate meter too.
no, it's not, so the,
What a meter.
the reason why I asked from they actually use a lot less energy than the heat pump. The
Heat pump water heater.
water heater. I installed one at my mom's house and it's on a 20 amp circuit. And it's size for a 4-bedroom house for 4 people.
The heat pump water heater,
The heat pump assist water heater.
solar assist.
Solar assist heat pump. That's a mouthful.
It was the water heated by the, what is heated by this
By
panels?
solar is kind of a misnomer. It doesn't need direct solar access. There are panels that go outside. Think of it as a refrigerator, right? It's just going in reverse. It's dumping it's dumping all of that outside or taking the heat.
Oh, so it's not like the heat pump hot water heater. It's a
Yeah, so it's
similar but different. It's separated.
Yes, it's separating it. So you're actually not dumping the cold air into your basement or wherever. It's outside.
So the heat pump is outside. The water is
Right,
inside.
yeah, it's just and it's just a pump moving the refrigerant to panels that are outside, and they can be vertically mounted. They don't have to be on the roof, like be on the side of the house.
Okay.
As a picture, I can show you but it's a cool technology, and it's been in Europe for 20+ years. I don't know why it's taken us so long to bring them over, but they're finally starting to come over, but they're manufactured over there. And they haven't done the Energy Star rating.
Well, I still would be in favor of limiting those. Not hearing any other takers on it for now. Mainly because I do think it's misleading to continue to support gas equipment, and especially at the prices we're seeing for gas.
Wouldn't we have to be fair to the customers that don't want to put the bill of converting to a heat pump?
Yeah, and they can do it they can voluntarily fund their own choice.
Same as the heat pump customers, right?
Just kind of putting our support where we think the future is. That's what the incentives are supposed to be designed to do. So I have a concern with putting our support and our funds in things that aren't going in that direction. And I think those two measures are not headed in the direction we want to go.
I mean, I would, on the central air, I mean, I would be okay with eliminating that, because for the most part, you're probably gonna do a heat pump for that. Versus, and encouraging people to, do that. If you're looking at central air, should really be considering a heat pump. Does that need a vote, or is that just something that we?
I think we need a vote for it if you want to change the program. Yeah, that's fine. I mean,
As is for, so didn't we say we want to keep it as is until spring or no?
Well, I just don't want
change?
to raise, I don't want to add measures or raise the numbers, but I'm fine with removing and streamlining, I guess, is where my perspective is, given where we are, to reduce the cost in any way we can, where it's not.
so essentially, I mean, we only did
100. No,
It's not,
Yeah, it doesn't move the, but
Yeah.
It's more about not installing things that are going to be around for 20 years that are a mistake to
Correct,
be
yeah.
installing today. That's what I see it.
I would say remove the central air. I'd like to have more discussion around the gas heating to Elton's point, where someone is getting off of oil, gas, and having some sort of potential tiering, which obviously further analysis discussion. Maybe that's at that point, that's where we remove that, but the central air at this point, like, I think that could come off.
Yeah, I mean, and you can easily coach them over to heat pump systems.
Yeah, so, but
Whereas-
we're sending a mixed message, right, by having $100 for central air conditioning, but we really, want to focus folks on, heat pumps. And $100, I think that's just a mixed message.
doesn't that automatically sort of divert people towards the heat pumps if we incentivizing them more? I mean, central air system, regardless of the tonnage, the
I thi-
customers get $100, right?
Right.
In my experience, people have continued to install ducted, extremely expensive central air systems because they don't have the information they need to know that that's not the choice they probably should be making. So I feel like this allows you to have that conversation to make sure that the person. It's just
Yeah.
another avenue for being able to have that conversation when they realize there's not an incentive for it.
I think it's a mixed message,
Blatantly
and
high.
just not having it, helps with clarifying that message. And moving, into the heat pump realm versus a central A system. Because you can do a ducted heat pump system, right?
True.
That's
At a higher cost than normal. right?
well, you're already doing a ducted central air.
You probably wouldn't do either in most cases.
No, I know, but I'm just saying in terms of, I think it sends a mixed message.
Well, it's getting late. Is there broad support for removing central air?
I would be in support of it.
Phil, do you have thoughts? Can we remove central air?
Well, I'm okay if we think that the air conditioning industry is sophisticated enough that they're selling all energy efficient units. So that we don't have people buying central air units that are now less efficient because they're not going to get a rebate.
I would say that's probably a pretty spot on analysis.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
All right,
All right, so we'll eliminate the central air for now. We'll stay at the 0.07 as part of the rest of the operating budget, and then
Revisit it.
and then we'll revisit it in the spring.
Yeah, maybe look at when you're revisiting in spring, see what kind of a potential tiered with Elton's suggestion, if someone is coming off of, doing a complete retrofit of their home from.
Eliminating oil or eliminating
Yeah.
gas conversion and going to.
that
heat.
makes sense.
Yeah, making
We should
100%.
incentivize people more than just
That makes sense.
Going that.
That's-
an additional, just an additional heat pump to their existing systems.
Yep, that's good.
All right.
Do we need to do a formal vote?
Formal vote for the overall operating budget.
Do we want to cover gas too before we do the vote?
yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Haven has been patiently.
Yeah. The gas is the same, conceptually, it's the same as electric. The costs on the purchased gas side have gone up, same thing. I went from 5.6 up to 8.5, so it's just under 3 million. And on the cost of gas, which is a little bit over a third. And Mark Roberts actually is gonna be giving the same speech, or the same presentation, as MWEC, but on the natural gas side next month. He'll be in to do a presentation. And so I took the additional 3 million and I spread it across the different buckets, budgetary on, the different, rate classification of the residential, commercial, municipal on the revenue side. The conservation budget is, primarily carried, it is 100% carried on the electric side. It's not on the gas side, so there isn't any conservation revenue or expense contemplated on this budget either. And the same thing is true, the comment about the OPEB. We just don't have the numbers yet, so that's the same. So there really aren't any major swings on the gas budget at all, except come on, yeah, other than the supply side. So it's kind of the same story.
So the 8.5 is informative from MWIC, or is it just an estimate?
It's an estimate now based on the portfolio that we have. There may or may not be some change coming next month when we talk to Mark Roberts. So it's the best information that we have right now.
So could it be 9.5?
I hope not.
I know.
Let's say,
So the issue is reclassification of capacity, and that he's still working on that, but he hasn't requested any reclassification yet because we wanted to get a full year, so.
Yeah. So it's not worst case, best case, it's best guess. It's, I guess, so that's how it's presented. So.
So that if you want to approve the operating budgets, that would be probably be separate.
Do I have a motion to approve the operating button?
I'll make a motion to approve the operating budget with the changes to the, or no?
Yeah, the one item,
Yeah, elimination of.
living at the central air on the date.
Yep. We have to specify the point outside.
No, because that's.
Okay, it's fine. It's fine. It's already in budget.
Baked in, yeah.
I will second that.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Commissioner Cool guy.
Great, unopposed? Thank you very much.
All right, on the capital budgets. Quickly, I think, Dave, you want to just cover very quickly the high level stuff for next year? And then obviously we've talked a lot about the energy park, so we're carrying some money in next year to obviously start.
Yeah, so high level is the solar for Wakefield Ave, will continue will be pushed into next year. We have system upgrades that we plan on doing on some feeders and just cap banks and recloses. We have some 4 kV conversion to complete. That's the 200,000 really to clean up the Burns Yard in 2023. We'll do that. And then streetlights on Foundry Street. So the decorative streetlight that we have on Albion Street, we're going to continue those on Foundry. Pole replacement program as a result of some of our inspections and just maintenance on the poles. And various upgrades. We do a lot of system upgrades, open wire secondary or old primary wire, and let's do some upgrades, so that covers that. And then the energy park is included, which we talked about. So we have a significant amount of site work to do on the energy park, and then that will be financed through the pool load program. So that's kind of zeroed out. And then Wakefield Ave on the substation side, we have relaying, testing, and protective upgrades at BB they'll be doing, and Burns substation again. We have some. There's some money put aside for that. I made a mistake. It's the up above. I said it's 4 kV conversion work we have. So that's on the Water Street side, and then the
Water Street and
Water Street, right? Yep. And then the Burns substation is the 225 is the decommissioning and the site cleanup. We spoke before.
Did we get any fun on streetlights from Foundry? Did we get any?
We got some reimbursement from the developer.
Okay, good.
And then we have skater work that we'll plan on doing, and then the rest is some technology. And facilities. Okay, any questions on the electric capital plan?
Nope.
Okay.
Ray, do you want to do the gas quickly? I think some of the streets obviously are part of that pending grant, so we're carrying them next year, but if we don't get approved, we might slide them too.
Yeah, so mostly have, the green chunks, or like Pete said, the EJ area. And then we have a block of streets, Central, Cordes, and Hancock are on one little project area. And then Corner Palette, it is part of one of the upgrades to the Adelaide. And then Avon Street is kind of working with the town with their paving list, and that's 23. And then 24 just is the Main Street project that we've been tabling for a while. And as you know, the regulators are all finished, so that's no longer the 300,000 allotted in the that line item.
How many new service installs does this budget support on an annual basis? I think it's 100,000.
Mark, do you have any input there?
I don't know, do we actually have a budgeted number for new service installs?
Carry a dollar amount.
Carry a dollar amount, not necessarily, we're not predicting 5, 10, 15, 20.
No, but it's based off a number that I think there was. Do we have the number for this year, the number of new services? It's on one of the charts, right?
I thought I saw it down somewhere, yeah.
Yeah,
I did not make those.
but we kept it level.
Yeah, we just
Yeah.
level funded it.
The bigger dollars around that side of things is the work we've been doing, moving meters outside. That's a huge project. We've made some tremendous headroom on that. And that has to continue.
Is that constrained by dollars or just by labor?
Labor.
Or by amount of hours and
Yeah, time and so we really, we do some of them around the town for various reasons, but mostly it's focused on tying it into the dead main and the cutovers. So if we touch a house and there's an inside meter, we're working to move it outside. So.
And why does emergent main replacement grow so substantially in 2025?
I think that
Really a plug because we really haven't identified the actual streets yet.
Right, and I think by then we're gonna be more, we're gonna be doing less dead main, because once we finish Main Street and Water Street and the EJ area, we'll be doing less dead main and more small sections of roads. But by 25, we're hoping that a lot of our main work is getting caught up. And therefore we'll be doing less, putting, a big chunk out to bid at the beginning of the year and more. We have to get 300 feet here and 250 feet there and 400 feet here. So that's why we're carrying it in that emergent bucket. There may be there'll be fewer large sections by then.
something more expensive per foot.
We'll use less contracting and more of our oown guys doing that.
The top part will decrease.
Okay.
Yeah.
But by then,
It just shuffles down.
Yeah.
I mean, we will have much of our main will have been replaced, so
There's still be a lot of the little stuff.
Okay.
So we're carrying it in that bucket right now. So when I don't know if it's easy to pull up the map, but it's actually probably not worth it at this point, Rafe, but the once we finish with a lot of that main streets, it's gonna be those smaller sections that are interconnecting, and those are gonna be focused on anything that's leak prevalent as well as paving requirements for the town, so there'll be fewer and fewer things that we're gonna pre-identify and more that, you know, we'll be grabbing as we go.
More on demand, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm sure when we look at this next year, there'll be a larger list of streets for 25, but we're carrying it as the number down below right now. You'll see more streets identified and that number will shrink.
Okay.
Now, new service installs, is that someone coming onto the system? Like what is covered in there? Is that like truly just new home or business coming onto the system?
Right, so the way we do that now is that if they dig it, we will lay the pipe and interconnect them. But we haven't been spending any time on installing new systems ourselves. We'll interconnect. But it's basically a requirement now that, because we don't have the time or the resource to do it. So if a homeowner on an existing street that is a single family and wants to dig it, then we'll do the pipe and the meter work.
Okay. And the only reason is that, you know, depending on how, you know, with the stretch code, and then if we adopt the specialized stretch code, that, you know, new services could potentially drop, because a specialized stretch code really does push towards electrification. So they still can go a fossil fuel, but it might push them. So we might do less of those.
Yep.
And then portable LNG, are we thinking we're going to be using that in the future again?
We're holding that out there if we do, we would have to do some work. There's a real potential that we may have to go back to that.
So are these just setup, are these like?
This is, that is,
Oh,
well, this would be just like recertifying the existing equipment that we have installed. Yeah.
okay, so this is a small portion of what would be needed.
Oh, yeah.
We actually.
We would have to strike a deal with a portable LNG vendor again and all that and operate it.
Infrastructure.
This is just recertifying the infrastructure.
Support to bring in the portable LNG.
That would be the physical work, yeah.
Are we thinking we will need that because National Grid is not going to grant us as much capacity as we have today, or because we think we'll need more capacity?
We're keeping it out there. If things don't work out the way we hope, then we need to have a backup plan.
Okay.
So.
The regulator upgrades, those are targeting stations, right? Not necessarily like installing a regulator at
an individual. So no, those are the three regulator stations that we have budgeted. So we have one at the corner of Farm and Water. That was the final one. There was one on Lowell.
Yep.
And then there was one in New Salem that we moved on to the private property. And so all three are complete. That was Jimmy and Raven did an amazing job on those. Usually, if you haven't driven by them, they look amazing. They really came out great. And I think we're probably the first utility in the state to finish that goal that came out of Merrimack Valley.
Yep.
Is there anything else pending from the order of the?
Not at this point that we're aware of. There could be other changes that come, but I think the main things we've addressed.
Okay.
Other than the public safety management stuff that Raven's heavily involved in on a regular basis. It's more safety protocols and programs and things like that but from capital investment perspective, moving the services outside and the regulators were the two big things.
Any other further questions or discussion?
How many more services do we need to move outside, like the meters?
On the board.
Yeah, it's in the packet.
Yeah, it's on the dashboard.
No, it's in the general manager's report.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
thought it was like, I don't know why.
It's under 2,000 now, I think.
500
Yeah,
a year,
they're 2001.
There are 2001 that were still out inside.
Okay.
And, but it's actually already under, it's below that now.
Basically like 1,000 a year.
Huh?
It looks like it's like 1,000 a year. Is the target.
No, 100 a year. We do 100 a year.
Oh, replace, that's meter replacement.
Yeah, that's-
1,000, yeah, change
I'm
out.
looking at the wrong thing. Thank you. Got it.
Is there I'm assuming as you touch things, you said that doing that, but if someone asks. Do you,
Request that their meter
Yeah.
be moved out, yeah, we'll do.
you
We'll-
honor
Yeah,
that?
those are those emergent ones, but mostly we're focused on when
Where
we're.
you're doing the dead main and
when
all
we're
all
doing
of
the
that,
street,
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there are a handful of those that pop up each year, or they're just a nightmare service and it's time to take care of it. And we're doing in conjunction with moving, just the annual meter replacement.
Okay.
So we've done a handful of those each year, but most of it is the services that we're touching. So yeah, as of today, we're already under that 2001. So if you remember just a few years ago, these numbers were,
They were inversed.
yeah.
Close to. Make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to the capital budget for both the electric and the gas plan. I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Motion passes unanimously.
Good.
We're at the end, right?
Well, we did the tree stuff at the
We-
beginning.
Yeah, I guess, do we have any more? I don't have.
We beat the
anything
trees
on
to
that.
death.
Said required a vote on the agenda.
For which one?
For the trees,
Did I have that?
removal notification vote required.
Oh, that might have just been a typo. It was informational. I got lazy.
You read to the very end. Congratulations.
Made me nervous on that one. Vote, yeah, vote on.
I copied the one above and then edited it.
Just so it's what required, and I said there's gotta be something more fancy than what we just.
Yeah, I know.
discussed about.
No.
So I'll entertain a motion to close the meeting so then we can actually
So move.
laugh and chit chat quietly.
Make a motion. I'll make a motion to close the November 2nd meeting. I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Corsi, aye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Passes unanimously. Good night, everybody.
Nice. Thank you.